Jack.
Levi.
The Book Club from Hell.
Hello everyone, this is Jack with the Book Club from Hell, a startup described by Forbes as likely to be the world's first trillion-dollar company, a groundbreaking, crowdsourced, community-focused environmental app which aims to increase the number of trees hugged per second by a factor of 1 million. Think about all of the environmentalists you've met. They're inclined towards left-wing politics, right? Well, imagine my delight at coming across Pentti Linkola, an eco-fascist and the author of Can Life Prevail, first published in 2004 and the subject of today's episode. Now, the term fascist gets thrown around quite a lot, and often spuriously. But in the case of Pentti Linkola, it's not unfair. To solve the problem of eco-catastrophe, he proposes a totalitarian state ruled by a small group of elite individuals whose goal it is to sharply reduce the human population, walk back technological progress, deglobalize, eliminate the concept of competition and suppress selfishness wherever it may arise. Born in Finland in 1932, Linkola became one of his country's most well-known ornithologists before choosing the life of a fisherman. His enduring love of birds explains why half of this book is him counting birds in the forest, leaving his musings on radical population reduction, of the human race I should add, to the other half. I went into this book expecting to hate it, but Linkola wrote well, and his ideas are a blast. So, enjoy.
Anyway, Pentti Linkola, it was pretty interesting reading someone who's definitely part of the environmentalist movement, who's also not extremely progressive. You can definitely see where the fascist part of the eco-fascist moniker comes from when talking about Pentti Linkola, when he starts talking about how there are certain superior people in the population who just naturally should command everyone else and tell them what to do.
Yeah. Except he's got a really, well, as we've already alluded to, eco-fascist, a really interesting spin on his fascism. Unlike all the previous fascists that we've read are like pretty boring, like pretty vanilla. It's like, oh yeah,
well,
Europeans,
it's just all kind of the
same. Or like Italians or like national. And this guy's just like, nah, we're fucking doing it for the environment.
Yeah. It's not for the state. It's not for the folk. It's all for the environment. It's all for birds.
Not for the race.
This guy particularly likes birds.
He really loves birds. It's for the birds.
I think he was an ornithologist.
Yeah, he was.
About half of this book is him talking about travelling around Finland and counting birds, sometimes with his wife, sometimes without. And every now and then he gets around to talking about the need to exterminate a large portion of the human population or complains about fat people. He has quite a few sections on fat people.
Yeah, he really doesn't like fat people.
He really does not like them.
Just like anti-fat, anti-capitalism, anti-technology. I guess like somewhat anti-democracy. Somewhat,
no,
he's
very explicitly anti-democracy. He thinks it's a terrible system.
Yeah,
he's
early in the book, it's not so.
authoritarian.
It's not like so crazy early in the book. Earlier in the book, he's just talking about animals and stuff. Yeah. And then just towards the end, he just goes like, "No, we need hardcore political intervention in this."
Anti-cat. He's strongly anti-cat.
So how should we talk about it? Should we go section by section, or do you want to do topics?
We can go through roughly section by section. I like how this book is structured. So I think it's a collection of newspaper articles and that sort of thing that he published over the years. And the book was published in 2011, I think. I'm pretty sure. At least that's when my edition's from. Might have been published earlier in Finnish.
It's strangely similar to the Osama book, though it's a collection of his writings. Except instead of a religious superstate, we need a eco-fascist superstate.
Well, not a superstate. We need to. Finland needs to cut itself off from the rest of the world, apart from a select few professionals in foreign relations, and they're the only ones who learn foreign languages as well,
or mathematics. No, too much maths. He really doesn't like mathematics.
No, but the book is organized into sections where he'll talk about certain topics. And the first few parts of the book don't really scratch on his more extreme beliefs. They're just him talking about how much he likes nature how he doesn't like the Finnish forestry industry, how he really doesn't like food hygiene standards. He really likes fishing. He quite likes hunting. It's that sort of thing. And then it's only really in the second half of the book, you get more of Pentti Linkola's wild beliefs, or the beliefs that people talk about him for, because no one will be requesting that we cover this book so that we can talk about Finnish waterfowl.
And maybe we should read an ornithological atlas book or something like that.
Maybe we should leave out all the parts that reference his lifeboat theory in this episode and only talk about Finnish waterbirds. I think that's exactly what people want. But it's really in the last third of the book that he starts bringing out the really wild stuff. And I quite like that sense of escalation. It's almost a narrative arc, how it starts off. He's never a vanilla environmentalist, but at the start of the book, he is the closest you could get to someone at Greenpeace or someone in a Greens party in whichever country you, dear listener, are living in. And then by the end of the book, he's escalated to, we need to centralise everything in an authoritarian government run by a handful of superior people who can handle all of this power to resist selfishness. We need to dramatically reduce the birth rate. We need to reduce the number of humans on Earth. We need to cut
10%.
all aid to the developing world so that they die. And we need to cut immigration from non-European countries into Europe so that they die in their countries and reduce the population. It's just... the escalation is the narrative arc, and I enjoyed that escalation.
And the five major parts, with which are each split up into several essays: Finland, forests, animals, the world and us, and the final part is the prerequisites for life. So it is well structured, and yeah, like I assume he must be in Finnish like quite a good writer. The translation's quite nice. I think it's actually well written.
Probably. It's very clear, which is
he
nice.
wrote for years, and he was an ornithologist professionally, so he must have done a lot of academic writing, probably, because he wrote
a fisherman.
He wrote papers, like academic papers on fowls and stuff.
Yeah, I think he trained as an ecologist or something like that, and really liked birds, and then spent a significant portion of his life living by fishing. And not the lame mechanized fishing. It was him like floating around in a lake and catching fish, or every now and then going out into the sea and catching fish.
Fishing. We've been getting into diving, and we want to buy spear guns. Well, by we I mean I want to buy spear guns and start like abalone diving and stuff.
Oh, so the spear guns
really
are
cool.
for diving, not for home defense.
I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. Yeah. So I quite... It's weird because I probably share some of his values, just not to the same extent. I just have other values as well. That I try to like balance between. Whereas Pentti just... And that seems to be a common theme amongst like a lot of what we've read is... one-dimensional worldview.
Yes, exactly.
Like Osama had his hang up on Islam,
he'd obviously done a pretty deep dive on Islam. He'd watched at least 12 hours of YouTube videos on Islam, and he was like, "Yeah, you know
at
what?
least 12 hours of YouTube videos on Islam.
I'm disappearing to Tora Bora and I'm going to wage a war against the West."
Whereas Pentti went just super deep on the environment. So why don't we start with a high-level discussion of Finland? Have you ever been to Finland?
Well, to that point that you just made about the one-dimensional view of the world, I've got a quote from Linkola here, which basically sums up the foundation of his beliefs. He says, "What matters for me is the preservation of life on Earth until a distant future." And that's kind of the entire book. He takes having as many different environmental niches filled by life as possible as his goal. And he's just trying to maximize for that.
I kind of like that. In a weird way, I actually have found myself agreeing on some aspects of this idea of like life surviving and the preciousness of life. My only caveat with like life surviving is if it wants to survive beyond the age of the sun, it is dependent on life on this planet getting out of this solar system before the sun explodes, and there's not many species that display the capacity to be able to do that. In fact, as far as I'm aware, there's only one.
yeah.
And it's us. And so I think like having like a panspermia objective is actually worthwhile, and you can actually think about it from an environmentalist like justification for panspermia vibes coming all over the galaxy. Humans doing it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Well, I agree with him that life is something precious and to be preserved, because as you know, there are so many planets orbiting stars in the universe that there's likely to be life elsewhere, but we don't know that for sure. So
we just don't know.
Yeah. So far as we know, there's only one place in the universe where life has arisen. And it's like life is basically, it's the same matter, it's the same building blocks as elsewhere in the universe. It's just in this little corner of the universe on planet Earth, the same matter that makes gas clouds and suns and planets has arranged itself into a configuration where it suddenly just becomes aware of itself. It's the universe turning back and looking at itself. And that just weird. Blows my mind so much. I just think that should be preserved. Amazing. And so I agree with him on that point. It's very strange.
I would actually go so far as to say, like, in some respects, I find would I include Pentti in this? Maybe. Environmentalists can actually be like short-sighted. Like, there's if we want life to go on beyond the next, when I think the sun is expected to explode in 5 billion years or 4 billion years, something like that. So if we want it to extend out beyond that, we really do need to get off the planet. And that requires taking like a really like abstractly long view.
I'd say we both share some of his instincts. However, we place our emphases differently to him, because for him, it is basically just preserving life on Earth or maximizing the number of ecological niches being occupied by life is what he wants. And that requires humans to, at least in his view, just stop with technology beyond a few essentials. He makes the Unabomber look pretty laid back about technology in comparison, actually. Do I? Oh, actually, no, it's not completely. It's not.
I think they would have gotten along.
It's not that easy a comparison. For example, Linkola does think that there are certain organization-dependent technologies which you should maintain, like trains, for example, that I think the Unabomber probably wouldn't like. But I do think the two of them would have gotten along if Linkola hadn't died in 2020.
I think they would have been strangely good friends.
Teddy and Pentti. Yeah. So anyway, you were wanting to talk about Finland.
Very cute.
Yeah. I mean, I'm writing a gay hentai fan fiction about the two of them. Not sure
just
when I'll publish it, but
cabin.
I reckon it'll be good. Yeah.
They've got a summer.
It's in the cabin. It's really cold out. Ted has been making bombs all day, and he's tired. And he hears a knock on the door and opens it. And there's this man standing there who's gotten lost in the forest because it's not Finland, and he doesn't know these forests as well as his native ones. And he asks to come in. And the roaring wood fire in Teddy's cabin means that he has to take off his heavy coat because now he's too hot. And now he has to take off his shirt because he's still too hot. I'll leave the rest up to your imagination.
Rippling,
things get even hotter in that
rippling kind of old man body. Is like one of those old men,
Yeah.
that are jacked. So it's like their skin's still, old, but then underneath they're like fully like shredded. And definitely not on tea. Yeah, that's Pentti.
Yeah. Finland. What were you wanting to say about Finland?
Have you ever been?
No, I've never been to Finland. I'd like to go, but I know very little about it. I basically know that they've got a really weird language and a lot of lakes.
And it's supposed to be beautiful. And saunas.
Sauna.
I really like it. Yeah, can't wait. I'd love to go to Finland and go to saunas. I'm pretty sure they get around the saunas.
Yeah, I think they... Are they like... Yeah, yeah. I don't know. So, the first chapter is about Finland, and it's mostly him talking about how good Finland used to be and how bad it is now that it's become westernized and Americanized, and now everything's shit. He talks about food hygiene in a chapter called Humbug. A lot of these themes are going to come up in various guises throughout the different essays or articles which compose this book. In this one, he talks about how good fishing is, how good fishing was when fishermen could catch fish and then bring them in ice chips that they chipped off from, I don't know, bits of floating ice in a lake or something, and bring them to people and sell them that way. But then the government started interfering and started demanding things like testing for bacterial levels and gutting and preparing fish properly and things like that. And it's just bullshit and it's making people weak. It's a sign of their degeneracy.
See, so like early in the book, he's like a free market, laissez-faire, cutthroat fucking capitalist. He's just like, I just want to sell my fish. Like, well, these regulators coming in and bacterial testing my fucking fish. Get out of here. Back in the good old days, there was no autoimmune disorders. Kids wouldn't die from peanuts and rotten food.
Yeah. He's got this, he's got a quote here, which is sort of a day in the life of Pentti Linkola. I reckon the guy really smelled. He smelled pretty bad.
I bet you smelled horrible.
Based on this quote, I quote, "Juice and jam always get covered in a layer of mould in my humid old cellar and porch. I simply mix it into the jam and eat it with gusto. Sometimes, after a long trip, I will find half a loaf of bread that has turned green at the back of the shelf. Well, I won't waste God's grain. There is no lake or stream in Finland from which I would not drink. Thirst is a terrible torment, and the vast range of tastes a real delight. I will press the fen down with my boot until enough water trickles out for me to catch in a cup or my cap. Downstream, I will keep a precautionary distance of a few kilometres from pulp mills. The lye-induced chapping of the lips is a greater deterrent than thirst. To this day, I haven't peeled a single apple, and yet my stomach has never been bothering me. Now, of course, they would say that I was born with an iron stomach. Actually, I'm sure there isn't much variation in human anatomy and physiology. Even bodily proportions don't vary that much. The only great difference between people is their brain capacity. They either have room for a vast number of thoughts, beliefs, and delusions, or they don't." And to this point, like, yeah, you can get used to eating dirtier food, and you're right. I'd say when I went to Nepal, I got sick. I got gastro eating the food there, whereas people who live in Nepal don't have a problem with it. You can get used to it. Like him drinking from mountain streams, like Jardy is not something you do get used to. But like, whatever.
You should probably... Yeah, he lived to be pretty old, right? So
I mean, I'm not going to eat mold, but I get where he's coming from. Yep, fine.
Yeah.
I guess the problem with
not
this
going to press him
is
too
that,
hard on that.
yeah. The problem with this is I just don't trust food manufacturers not to fuck people unless they're regulated to hell with food hygiene standards. And Pentti Linkola would probably say, well... Yeah, he would probably say, well, we should break up Nestle. Like, Nestle shouldn't exist.
And there's too many humans anyway, so what if a few of them die of, like, massive dose
Yeah,
of
exactly.
bacteria straight to their gut.
Yeah, yeah. So he might view it as a good thing, letting Nestle put whatever they want into food. Because I'm sure the people who work there would poison half the human population if it increased their profits by 5%. The next chapter's pretty good too, because it's called the Finnish body, and this is where him disliking fat people. Like, not where it starts, obviously. I'm sure this was a lifelong belief, but this is where he really starts going after them. So, in terms of situating this story, he's talking about I'm not going to try to pronounce that word. Some Finnish term for a national sports celebration.
Sportipäivät.
Sporty. Do they roll R's in Finnish?
No. Do they? Sporty. I don't know, maybe.
Sportipäivät. They all sound like they're kind of singing, so
I like it.
Sportipäivät.
Yeah, it's a cool word. Get around it.
I have no idea how to pronounce the A with the umlauts over it, but I don't know how to say anything.
As soon as there's any squiggles over any of the letters, that's an English speaker, I just give up.
Yeah, so I'll read a quote. And like in my notes, I have written next to this, I really didn't expect him to start mocking fat people. In essay 2 of this book, he's already really setting himself apart from your typical environmentalist who seems mortally afraid of offending anyone. Whereas Pentti Linkola is just like, nah, fuck that. I don't like fat people. I'm all about that fit lifestyle.
Environmentalism today is almost is closely paralleled by wokeism and that sort of cluster of political, I suppose, causes or whatever. But I mean, really, they're not. As Pentti Linkola goes to show, they're not actually that's not inherent in those ideas. For whatever reason, they're going together today. But Pentti's just like, nah, fuck it. I'm just about the environment. I don't like fat people.
Already in the second essay of this book, Pentti is demonstrating to me why at least my edition of this book was published by Arctos. So let me quote. Last spring, I took part in the Sportipäivät, our national sports celebration. Physical fitness is a matter very dear to me, and an early jog across Vasa with a young manager from the city leading the way was a real treat. And yet, some 500 people from all around the country had enrolled on the program to exercise and practice some sport, but only 30 of them showed up at the start, and half of those opted for the shortest walking marathon. Perhaps the example I have chosen is not a particularly good one. The marathon was on the second evening of the festival, and the program of the previous day must have been taxing. Nevertheless, narrow-minded as I am, I noticed too many typical Finnish men with reddish faces, plump cheeks, suspiciously bulging jackets, and windsheeters. Sure, there were some vigorous bodies as well. I was delighted at the sight of my fellow lecturer, Harry Holkery, with his jogging and Baltic herring diet.
He doesn't like
much of this chapter
fat
then
people
goes on
or
for
windbreakers.
Yeah. Him talking about how Finnish people like watching sport more than doing it, that the Finnish body is degrading. He notes that women are in better shape than men.
I feel like this could all of these things you could just replace Finnish with Australian, and he'd be describing Australia as well.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of Australians really like watching couch football. Or playing couch football. He blames this on the Finnish enslavement to machines from a young age. He says that instead of doing anything, people rely more and more on machines. So initially, he talks about farmers and says, okay, with a farmer, instead of doing all of this stuff by hand, or maybe with an ox or a horse or something, if you're a weakling, doing that, you developed muscles, you stayed fit, you didn't get fat. Whereas now they'll use combine harvesters, all of this farm equipment that I don't know what it's called or what it does because I'm a city boy. And I'm anything more degenerate than the farmers using machines. But it lets you get fat and out of shape. And he also says, yeah, you've got Finnish people who'll drive 500 meters somewhere instead of walking or riding a bike. And when he was talking about this, he was not driving me away. I'll say that much.
No, he was getting Jack on side. This is how Pentti gets somebody like Jack, sort of like lures him in with fat hate, and then sort of it was like, oh, by the way, let's wipe out 90% of the population.
Yeah, it's the bait and switch. He starts out with saying, yeah, people should ride their bikes more. And I think, oh, yeah, that's pretty good. And while you're still thinking that, he swaps out ride their bikes more with exterminate half the human population. You sign up for the Pentti Linkola world order and notice that people start dying all around you. You're like, hey, wait, this is what I signed up for.
Yeah, he was even saying in the final essay, which, I mean, we won't talk too much about now, but he's like, yeah, we're going to have to see like less people, but also each person is going to have to be like smaller and eat less.
Yeah. Oh, and then this chapter, there was a really good section where he starts complaining that one of the Finnish presidents was fat. And like, what kind of society allows their leader to not have a beautiful body? I wonder if he'd have gotten along with
I'm so on board
with Yukio
with Tony
Mishima
Abbott.
on this. Tony Abbott was pretty jacked. He probably still is. I'm pretty sure on several episodes we've noted Tony Abbott's aesthetics.
Recently, it was really weird because I lived in Melbourne for a very long time. So a lot of my political, like exposure to political points of view is largely left, because Melbourne's like the left-wing capital of Australia. And I saw a Tony Abbott article about the environment and how he was saying like, you know, basically settle the fuck down, stop being hysteric. And I was like, oh, what? For the first time, I've read a Tony Abbott article and found myself agreeing. I'm like,
Oh, Tony. Like when he brought a lump of coal into Parliament.
Look, I might just convert to prosperity Christianity. Start going to Hillsong.
Prosperity Christianity. Nice. No, I've been looking more and more into Orthodox Christianity. I really like the mysteriousness of it. It's so much.
Get into the mysticism.
Christianity.
I would want some of that, like
great.
apocrypha.
No, they don't like apocrypha. I was looking at reviews of this book I was thinking of getting, and in a few of them it was rated 1 star because they were saying that the author was a pseudo-Nestorian. It's like, I don't know what this means.
What's a pseudo-Nestorian?
It makes me want to get into this more, given that people are getting so worked up about whether someone is a pseudo-Nestorian or not. But we're not here to discuss Orthodox Christianity, as cool as the apathetic tradition is. We're here to talk about Pentti Linkola complaining that one of his presidents was fat. What have we got? He talks about how good his childhood was because he and the other kids ran around and threw snowballs at each other and were active instead of staring at screens. And that's why Pentti Linkola is a jacked demigod and everyone else is a flubbery mess.
So people listening to this show, basically if you've listened to the BAP episode or probably the Yukio Hashima, is that how you say his name again? Mishima. Yukio Mishima episode.
Mishima,
or probably,
but I'm probably
Mishima.
mispronouncing it.
Or probably some other episodes. Jack and I definitely get around this point of view that our leaders should be jacked. Strongly agree. We need jacked leaders. So thumbs up to Pentti for that one. I actually, in these parts of the book, I was like, yeah, this is fair enough, whatever. Like, you know, he's a guy from, I don't know, like a fishing and sort of rural background. Probably had heaps of like activity when he was growing up, like physical activity. I think it's great.
I think that persisted throughout his life.
Yeah, I think it's great. I would when I have kids, I'd love to have a very active setting for them to go and like get outside. Go see the world.
I think one of the few people more
like
obsessed about exercising than us is my wife, and you should hear some of her plans for what she wants to put our future children through.
They just pull them,
She's going to be a really scary mother, actually. I feel like I'm going to have to be the voice of reason or the moderating
settle
force
down
in our household. So calm down.
Just like making them run marathons when they're like 3.
Not when they're 3, but you're closer to the truth than you think.
Yeah, fucking good on her.
No, she's currently training
awesome.
for a trail marathon in Austria, which has a 2,000 meter elevation gain. It sounds brutal. Sounds absolutely savage.
Yeah. She might one day do that sort of thing with like cross-country pram or something. A kid on her back. Just like just teach them straight away.
No, well, she's been looking into, okay, what sort of exercises can I do when I'm pregnant? Which basically she just decided, look, I'll just keep doing long distance running and chin-ups and kettlebell swings and stuff like that until it gets uncomfortable.
Yeah, maybe just
and then she was
cut the deadlifts.
She was looking into what kind of things can I do with a pram and which prams can I basically beat the shit out of and not break. That's kind of how we're going to buy prams. It just, can I run trail with them uphill? Like, I'm putting this on her. I'm not really that different. Like, that's what I want to do as well. It's just... Anyway, how about we go on to sales? Oh, actually, before we finish off this this first chapter on fat people, which it's not the last one. This was an enduring concern of his. One of the main reasons why he thinks that you need a vigorous body is because it prevents enslavement to machines. And I'd mentioned this earlier, but he really views it... He views it really as a point of virtue that you're not reliant on machines. I quote, "Every individual who walks, runs, rides bikes, swims, rows, paddles, skis, shovels or hoes is setting up a line of defense against the mad onslaught of machines. If he is a parent, grandparent, teacher, youth mentor, or exercise instructor who also manages to win a few other people over to his side, he is doing an even better job." So it's not just that he dislikes fat people aesthetically, which I'm sure was the case. Like, I'm positive that was one of the reasons why he not only disliked them but wrote so much about disliking fat people. But it was also that he views it as a symptom of being part of a degenerate society. I think he used the word degenerate in this book. I think he did. I'm trying to think, actually. I'm pretty sure he does.
Degenerate must be the most common word in the book club from hell. At least one of the most common words, degenerate.
Yeah, definitely. It comes up... What are some other ones? Actually, race mixing... Well, if race mixing is hyphenated, then it's one word. That hasn't come up much because we haven't read many books which talk about race mixing, which I'm quite happy about. But yeah, probably in the first half of our back catalogue, that was one of the most common ones.
The first, sort of episodes 1 to 10, there was a lot of race mixing. And what's the...
before we decided
like
we need to get away from white nationalism because it's all the same.
It's good.
Miscegenation,
I don't think those people would
was one that they like to use a lot.
I bet you I have a suspicion that all the people who speak out against miscegenation also look up like interracial BBC on Pornhub.
100%. If you look at the type of porn they watch, it's going to be like fucked up cuckold humiliation videos, like ball stomping and shit like that. No one gets that wound up about race mixing unless they've got some sexual kink. It's the same in the same way as whenever you've got a politician who speaks out against gay people or something like that and about how they're awful and how he doesn't like them. Like, whenever I hear that, I immediately think, like, you're getting fucked in the ass. Like,
just set a timer until they get caught.
Yeah. Until they get caught. Like, there is no way you're this homophobic in public and you're not sucking dick behind closed doors. It's always a tell. All right, the next chapter is kind of boring. It's him. He's got a lot of old man yells at cloud chapters.
That's actually
This
what I
one is-
wanted to say. I loved it. I actually really enjoyed the book because it really
The old
had
man
such
yells
a-
at cloud chapters.
Old man yells at cloud. Old man yells at shopping centres. Old man yells at fat people. It's just the vast majority of the book is
And
just
then
him
old
being an
man
angry
finally
old man.
calls for the imposition of a fascist state and extermination of a large portion of the human population. Old man just gets sick of it all.
For some reason, there's just I have a soft spot in my heart for angry old man yelling at cloud. It's something that's always just spoken.
That
to
is
me.
one of the few aspects of aging that I look forward to.
Just having. I'm looking forward to being able to fart on public transport and nobody being able to say anything about it to me. Old people. Have you ever spent much time around old people? Sometimes I just fart. They just go give a shit. Just let it loose.
Yeah. Anyway, as we alluded to, this chapter is about his thoughts on basically Danish shopping centres. He doesn't seem to like Denmark so much. He was talking about how he's cycling with his wife through Sweden and Denmark, and he really liked the huge beech forests. But the shopping centres in Denmark, he felt that those were a letdown. He says, "We were also horrified by the ugliness of the shop windows. We knew that all decent shops in Finland hired people to make their windows look artsy and stylish." Actually, I should also add, for Pentti Linkola, Finland is just the best place in the world. There's nowhere better.
Yeah.
And this is something that I quite like about him, is that he's so proud of the place and the culture that he comes from. And so much of his angriness and old man yells at cloud seems to come from a place of real wounded love, in that he sees Finland as this great place and he's so proud to be a Finn. But Finland is embracing these foreign Western traditions that are undermining everything that he loves about it. And that's something that I liked about him, that he's so proud to belong to a time and place.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't realize until reading, I guess, this, but also Varg, and maybe I've read some other stuff, like just the sense that the Scandinavian cultures don't necessarily regard themselves as like Western, whatever.
Yeah. But even within Scandinavia, he considers Finland to be very separate from the Nordic speaking or the Nordic language speaking countries in Scandinavia.
So yeah, it's interesting because he's a mixture of like nationalism, but not socialism. You could call him an eco-fascist, but you couldn't call him an eco-Nazi because he doesn't give a shit about human social, like, anything.
No, he doesn't.
And he's
At
a
least in the
traditionalist.
parts here where he's talking about how much he likes Finland and how proud he is of being from this particular place. He's quite conservative. He also later in the book talks about tradition and the value of tradition, which is just another way that he sets himself apart from probably most environmentalists now, that he is quite conservative in these ways. He's quite conservative until he gets to the point of radical rearrangement of society, and then he's not conservative at all. Here's a deeply conservative quote, given that it seems almost all philosophers who deal with aesthetics, at least at the moment, are conservative. "Beauty is always a central and inalienable value, a value far more important than economy." I should also say he's saying this with reference to the disgust he feels at supermarket windows because they're plastered with advertisements for cheap food and sales for that food. And he sees that as crass and an eyesore and inimical to beauty. When he was saying this stuff, I thought, so the stuff about beauty being far more important than economy, I would say beauty should be valued far more than it currently is with its relation to the economy, but it's not far more important. But I was definitely on board with a lot of what he was saying here.
Jack's all about that aesthetics, that aesthetic society. We want to go back to
What
like
making
Greco-Roman
things that are
days.
beautiful is deeply important. You look at beautiful buildings from the past that were more expensive to build than if we built them with fucking plywood and stickle bricks, which seem to be the preferred building materials now. For whatever ghastly block of faceless flats or some multi-purpose centre is being chucked up in 30
Yeah,
seconds.
back when
nearby.
they lived underneath a hard money standard, they used to build buildings that lasted.
No, but beauty is a fundamental value in, for example, buildings, because what happens when
absolutely.
some faceless, disgusting building which no longer serves its purpose is not needed? Will people tear it down? What about a beautiful building, like a building that was built with beauty in mind for a purpose, but that purpose is no longer relevant? What happens then? Will people find a new reason to use the building? They repurpose it because it is beautiful and we want to retain that beauty. I think there is a fundamental value to building things with beauty in mind.
Absolutely.
And I was on board with Pentti when he was saying this.
We like it. We like beauty in the male body, like Bap and Yukio. We like beauty.
I have no problem. I've spent too much time in the gym not to feel completely comfortable like complimenting other guys' physiques despite being hetero. It just doesn't worry me at all. I burned that out.
Nice triceps, bro. They're looking pumped, looking swole.
Yeah, that quad sweep.
Yeah, no, I think I'm on board with the beauty stuff as well. I just think that also there's an element of he doesn't seem capable of and this is definitely a recurring theme that he doesn't seem capable of considering the world from anybody else's point of view.
A lack of empathy.
Yeah, and there's a kind of implicit sense of like his preferences being taken as like the only preferences that should matter. So say there might be some shop window that is beautiful. The designer, like they had an interior designer and it's got nice clothes and stuff. Pentti might look at it and be like, oh, that's garbage. But then somebody who really appreciates, I don't know, that sort of design might think that's beautiful. So, yeah, I don't know.
To defend Pentti here,
yes.
I do think there are certain designs that basically universally a person will look at and say, yeah, that's just disgusting. That's not nice. They're designs designed to catch your attention, but they're not beautiful. So I think I'm still with Pentti on this one. There was a section here where I thought he was going to start talking about capital T, capital J, the Jews, but to his credit, he never does. It's probably a sign of just the weird shit we read for this podcast, that when people start talking about the zeitgeist of money and people promoting the cult of money, I start thinking like, oh man,
here it comes.
I know where this is going.
Are they going to start talking about who controls Hollywood?
Yeah, but he didn't. So I'll read the quote that made me, like, when I realized,
like,
he's not going to start talking about Jewish people.
Yes,
okay.
What a relief. All right, fantastic.
So this is with reference, he was winding up to this by talking about there is one group of people who are most culpable for establishing and promoting the current zeitgeist of money. but then he pulls a bait and switch on you. He doesn't go after Jewish people. So I quote, "For the sake of clarity, however, we might point here to one main culprit. Journalists, those mediators of information, an unbelievably irresponsible, vile and harmful category of men. Journalists are not only monkeys running after the latest trends, emulating each other like sheep. Journalists also dictate fashion and values. It is journalists who turn the 0.1% increase in the interest rate of Luxembourg's central bank into the main headline of the day. Journalists effectively have the same function as the sales signs in shop windows or the advertising leaflets in our letterboxes. These mediators of information have an incomprehensible desire and capacity to fill people's consciousness with rubbish that is both trivial and false, while erecting huge walls around serious questions. Journalists make sure that vital issues like population explosion, depletion, pollution and extinction are only followed by the readers of specialist publications, as was previously the case with financial news. Journalists peddle gambling, People buy it and invest their lousy pennies. The students I knew, even those not enrolled in the School of Economics, have all joined investment companies or the stock market. A double moral has prevailed. We are crucifying a few bank managers who are as guilty as half of the nation, while letting off the hook the greatest inciters of financial gambling, journalists. I can't tell you how relieved I was to get through this section where he's talking about promoters of financial gambling and people forcing others onto the stock market and duping the population without blaming Jewish people.
He was like, Jack saw like the journalist. Journalist. Jack's having flashbacks to reading Bronze Age Pervert.
Yeah, or Varg smile.
Or Varg.
Fucking Varg
Like,
smiles. Yeah, the Holocaust didn't happen, but gee, it was good that it did. Fuck that book.
I got to be honest, when he was bitching about journalists, I was like really on board.
When he was talking, yeah, I was like, yeah, look,
Like,
I
yeah.
wouldn't go this far, but I'm not directionally that different.
I'm like, strong language, but you know, he's a passionate guy.
So one thing I actually did do, I've been doing this for quite a while, but it does tie into what he's talking about, was that I decided that instead of reading the newspaper daily, I would read it once a week. So I read the paper once on a Saturday morning. I'm so much happier for it, and I feel like not merely am I less wound up about everything going wrong in the world, is I feel I actually have a better idea of what's going on, because instead of getting tied up on the day-to-day minutiae of things as a story evolves, I just look at it once a week when people have had enough time to narrativize it or to contextualize it. I just read it there and then keep living my life, because ultimately a lot of the disaster pornography that fills newspaper pages, I'm not convinced it makes you any better a person for knowing about it. You're not somehow more enlightened or more worldly or a morally better person because you, for 30 seconds a day, worry about some people you've never met, never will meet, don't know anything about, who are currently undergoing some persecution or are at the mercy of some act of nature. That doesn't actually improve you in any way. It just makes you... It makes you more stressed, and it makes you more obnoxious when someone else has a problem and you go, oh, well, what about X population undergoing Y trial in this part of the world that you'll never visit?
There's always crazy shit happening.
For a lot of this.
There's always crazy shit happening. Yeah, especially because the world's so connected now. It's like, well, the planet's fucking enormous. There's 8 billion people.
And your awareness of it doesn't alleviate the suffering. I mean, ultimately, it's like, what is the point of knowing about it if you're going to do fuck all about it?
It's just how big the world is. It's like if you have a channel to all the happenings, like whether it's Twitter or news website or a paper or something, it's just like there's always going to be bad stuff happening. And there's just so many people,
Yeah,
you just get the highlight reel of all the bad shit that's happening. And you're going to have a bad time.
And it just feels pornographic to me.
I don't.
When I read about stuff that directly affects me
for fucking ages, I love it. I love not consuming the news.
I consume it, but I tend to restrict it to things that affect, for example, Australia, Europe, the United States, things that affect countries that I have a connection to, that people I love have a connection to.
Not Eritrea. Not keeping up with your daily dose of Eritrean news. Not keeping
it's just I mean, it's sad what's happening
Leone.
there. It's basically like African North Korea. It's like, yeah, it's shit. But what does me knowing about it actually change?
Don't you care, Jack? Don't you care?
The thing is, it's like, yeah, I care, but me just memorizing factoids about Eritrea doesn't actually change anything on the ground there. It's just masturbation. Like, yeah, if it affects you, if you're going to go out and do something about it, fine, right? Read all about the news in Eritrea. Go for it. But otherwise, like, what's What's the fucking point? It doesn't make you smart. It doesn't make you worldly. It doesn't make you cultured. It just means that you waste your time each day reading about shit that doesn't matter to you and that you're never going to do anything about. Like, for all the people who spend all their time going, oh, well, what about this great problem in Syria or whatever the fuck? Which, I mean, I guess, yeah, that has a big effect on Europe because you'll get waves of people fleeing war there if it goes bad. So, like, that makes sense to learn about. But I don't, when people learn about some anti-government protests in a country that doesn't have anything to do with them and then tell you about it and act as if they're superior to you for caring about it, it's like, why? Like, what effect does you learning about this have on the world besides your ability to be obnoxious?
And this is why we like old man yells at cloud vibes.
This is why at the age of 30, I'm an old man yelling at a cloud. Except I'm doing it with a tiny internet audience. So it's either slightly more or slightly less acceptable.
A tiny little internet audience.
I prefer the former. Thank you for listening to us yell at clouds. Anyway, what's in the next chapter? What is the majority and what is the minority? He doesn't like elections.
Yeah, I feel like the early parts of the book is just like salt and pepper, like the stuff for the later parts of the book.
No, the early, it's not salt and pepper. It's like you're at a restaurant and you can smell them cooking your food in the kitchen. You're like, ooh, I'm getting little hints of what this is going to be. He doesn't like elections, but what's the problem with elections? It's only once you get to the main course, which is especially the last chapter of the book. It's where you realize really what he thinks. Where democracy is suicidal. And a lot of these articles are him clapping back at people who've written articles that he doesn't agree with. Like Pentti Linkola, he wasn't on Twitter, but I really wish he was.
A lot of them were responses. It obviously didn't read the other person's thing, but it was kind of cool. It's like a dialogue. I don't know. I was going into this book expecting to really dislike Pentti Linkola.
Yeah, me
I've got to
too.
be honest, like I was not going in friendly, and I actually kind of came out of it almost liking him, just thinking like, oh yeah, you could just be the grumpy old man on the street, but you kind of like him. You're like kind of scared of him, like maybe every.
I liked it. I don't think it's worth. This is kind of giving away at the very end of the episode, but whatever. It's not like we're disciplined in any episode with anything anyway. I wouldn't recommend reading the whole book to people. I'd recommend reading the last chapter, and then you could just pick chapters at random, really.
Yeah, just flick through.
I'm not disappointed I read it. It was
maybe
a lot easier than I thought it would be.
Man yelling at a cloud, or maybe you'll get a bit of like fascist planning.
Exterminate the human race.
You never know. Yeah, Pentti keeps you guessing.
Okay, so here we go. So, Life Protection Utopias in Agriculture from 1998. There's some guy called Mikko Hovila. I'm assuming it's a he, but I don't actually know if Mikko is a male or female name in Finnish.
I really
and
like
Linkola
Finnish
really
names
bristles.
Now. I'm a big fan.
He bristles at Hovila's suggestion that Linkola's ideal future is utopian. So Linkola says, when in an article entitled Utopian Politics Are Dangerous, Hovila described the model societies suggested by Pentti Linkola and Eero Palaheimo as unrealistic, dangerous utopias, his line of reasoning makes no sense whatsoever. What could be more dangerous than the present unwavering and relentless descent into a mass grave? This society of economic growth and technology that every second is destroying the life around us. If nothing else, the programs of Linkola, Palaheimo and Schumacher, who was also mentioned by Hovila, are examples of extreme realism, anti-idealism and anti-utopianism. Each in their own way, these programs have specifically been devised to secure the survival of society, mankind and life. They are as far away from being dangerous as could possibly be. And this is a prelude. This is the smell of your cooking food coming from the kitchen, foreshadowing the meal that you're about to have.
Like, I'm not a utopian.
Because he's saying that our society, he calls it suicidal society, is driving itself towards extinction. He says if we don't change our current way of life, of consumerism, of technological progress, of competition, of democracy, then we will go extinct, and we're going to bring down a lot of life on Earth with us.
Yeah. Bit of a pessimist, wasn't he? Bit of a downer. Probably wouldn't invite him to like a party. He's gonna rock up to the party just to make everybody sad.
He's got another quote here, which I didn't... this was one of the points at which I just didn't disagree with him at all. He says, "The worst mistake that anyone thinking about society can make is to envisage the prevailing system as the starting point. To begin from a tabula rasa, a clean slate, is an absolute must in order to develop any sort of program. Human history across the world offers a wide range of societal models. The model that happens to be the prevailing one in our own society does not represent any intrinsically superior point of reference. Any binding to a given societal model paralyses the whole thinking process, as is shown by the conventionalities that Hovilla, like many others, writes." So it is interesting. So when you're considering how you think society should run, I think it is really worthwhile not trying to be tied to what you're used to, not ascribing to it this special universal significance. Maybe you will reach the point when you're thinking about how to organise society, you'll get to the stage where you just say, okay, well, yeah, what I do is the best, or what I'm used to is the best. But you might not.
Yeah, it's probably pretty.
I think what he's basically saying is that within the space of ideas, of all possible ways to run society, it's very unlikely that the way things happen to be run in your society is the optimal way above everything else.
Yeah, it's super unlikely. In fact, I'd say it's probably...
it's so like unlikely as to basically be impossible.
Or probably is. Just any society is going to have problems. Like, even if you took, like, I don't know, like a very pro X, say X is the thing that you care about, you'd find the country or the community that does that the best, but then there'll be some other Y in what they do, or Z you'll complain about. Unless you're Pentti, and then you can just get rid of everybody and just kill everything, like no society. Or just pre-agricultural society. That would be the best society.
Exactly. That goes without saying.
and nice freshly gutted fish. Oh no, not gutted. Just fish. Just a slab of fish. Raw, juicy fish.
What about this quote from the 1999 article Against Highway Crime? "It should be emphasised that, given the current state of the world, building a motorway is undoubtedly a criminal activity, classifiable among major crimes. All actions that encourage, increase, ease or speed up traffic are criminal activities." He really does not like cars. I mean, not that that's really any leap of the imagination. I'm sure people could have inferred from what we've said about Pentti that he doesn't like cars, but to be explicit, he really does not like cars.
One of my favourite subgenres of videos on YouTube are videos taken from cars on like forest roads, and there'll be like a bear or something. There's a great one where there's two bears fighting somewhere in like, I don't know, where would it be? What's one of the states with bears? Minnesota? Minnesota has bears? Surely Minnesota has bears. Or Canada or something.
I've never been there. I've never thought about Minnesota.
Or I also like it when you see like an elk getting hit by a car and it just fucks the car up. Elk's like 500 kilos or something. Just destroys the car. Yeah. I'm not against the criticism of roads. I like one of the things that we've done in certain parts of Australia, like in some of the highways and freeways outside of Sydney, is we've put these little walkways for the climbing marsupials to like get across the road, the like 8-lane highway or whatever, and they can climb.
Yeah, otherwise it's a huge problem because either they get hit by cars and then they learn that the road's dangerous, and so they get inbred. Because if there's just this little island where that species is, they start getting inbred.
Yeah, so the little bridges are really cute. I like them. In fact, I would actually advocate more little bridges for the little animals. I think it's adorable.
It's harder with something like a kangaroo. Kangaroos just seem purpose-built for getting hit by cars. They're such fucking dumbasses when it comes to cars.
They jump at just the right height, and they're pretty fucking dumb
to snatch through the windscreen as well.
To
make sure that not only they die, but they kill everyone else in the vehicle.
There's some great videos on YouTube where I look at the kangaroos as like jumping over a fence or something and just hooking its foot, slamming its face into the ground. It's like, you dumb fucking animal. I love kangaroos. But
very cute. I really like them, but they're not the smartest animal.
I really like them though. In Tasmania, there's an animal called a paddy melon, and it's like
they're really cute. Yeah,
really cute little fat wallaby thing. It's like
a furry beach ball,
big fat ass. It's just completely useless. It's only the sort of animal that could survive in an environment with like no natural predators.
Yeah, it just survives in Tasmania.
Like maybe thylacine used to eat it back in the day, but these days, like they run rabbit, completely unopposed. The little fat paddy melons.
In Tasmania, are there still people who talk about thylacine sightings?
Yeah. People,
because I remember years, like I can't remember when, how old I was, but I remember years ago when I was in Tasmania, I was talking to this Tasmanian guy who was really into thylacine sightings.
Yeah,
it was like, nah, mate, they exist. They're still out there. They're just hiding, and I've seen them.
Yeah. No, there are people who think they still exist.
He was all about them.
And there's some people who think there's either thylacine or a very closely related animal that's basically like a cousin or something, thylacine, in Indonesia. And there's people from Tassie who've gone over to Indonesia to try and find this like mysterious like shadow thylacine. I really, really like Tasmania.
And so that they can bring it back to Tasmania.
Yeah. Well, there's some
I'd be all about seeing Tasmanian tigers.
Yeah, they're amazing. There have been some people who have argued that we should, because we have, I believe, in Sydney in one of, sorry, excuse me. In Sydney, in one of the museums, there's like a thylacine. Oh, by the way, people, just so you know, thylacine is the Tasmanian tiger. It's like this
oh, we probably should have said that up front.
Dog thing with stripes. Stripes kind of like a tiger. But it wasn't actually it wasn't a marsupial. It was and it wasn't a mammal. It was like this other really rare type of sort of adjacent thing. Or maybe it was a marsupial. Anyways, really cool animals.
Yeah, but I'm not going to pretend to know.
Yeah, they're all really cool. But there have been people who have floated like, hey, why don't we try to like impregnate like some other animal using the like, I don't know, IVF methods or something, like transplant the DNA
Jurassic
from like these embryos or these sort of half developed thylacines that we have in preservation, which I thought was cool. I don't think anybody's going to do it, but I kind of would like them to do it, to give it a go. I don't know just like how irresponsible that is, but
yeah, but
Levi's
very
very pro playing God.
I want to bring back megafauna.
Oh fuck yeah!
Like if we're gonna Jurassic Park anything, I think it should be megafauna.
Bring back the woolly mammoth.
Yeah,
Bring back the. There were these giant wombats in Australia.
Yeah, the
like
turbo wombats. They're like the size of a car.
And then there was there's this other Australian bird called there's an Australian bird called a cassowary, which is like this hectic kind of emu or ostrich looking thing, but it's much smaller, and,
which is venomous.
And it's got this like weird thing on its head.
They're really dangerous.
Yeah, they're really aggressive, really dangerers. And there used to be like a mega sized cassowary thing in Australia.
Oh fuck that! Like a cassowary is already almost the height of a human.
Really dangerous, really aggressive.
And they're really fast as well.
I do wish Australia just had like at least one dangerous animal that wasn't like a spider or something, like, you know, just like, because
a snake or a spider, things that kill you in lame ways.
Cool, you know, like lions
like
and
poisoning you
and
and things like that. I just want something that tears you to pieces.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's lots of things. There's the blue ringed octopus that's very dangerous and venomous. So there's lots of we've got the box jellyfish, one of the most venomous things in the planet on the face of the planet. We've got all these spiders and stuff. Lots of stuff.
No, but what about the taipans?
Taipans?
The inland and coastal taipans will really fuck you up.
And so,
fortunately, they're in South
taipans?
Australia,
I think
so I don't have to
taipans
worry
will
about
actually
them.
get in the water. They'll fucking swim. It's scary.
So it's different. The inland taipan is far more venomous, but is quite shy and avoids humans, whereas the coastal taipan is quite aggressive and will try to hunt you down. It'll come after you.
It's gonna come after you. This fucking snake. It's so scary.
It's
just
got your number.
Oh, no. We were diving
It can't eat you,
recently,
but it's gonna fuck you up anyway.
I saw these rays. We went out to this marine sanctuary at like half an hour outside of Hobart, and full of rays, amazing, beautiful animals. Hey, if you go too close to them, they like arc up, their backs arch, and they can also like curve their tail, kind of like a scorpion. And you can tell if they're like, if you're getting too close to them. Largely placid, as long as you just don't get close to them, basically.
Yes, as long as you don't Steve-O when you're self-hunting.
It just gets speared. And we were swimming along, but the water was really murky. There's just I don't know why it was murky, but for whatever reason it was very murky. So every now and then I'd be within like a meter of an angry ray, and then have to be like, "Wow, no, I'm sorry, I just didn't see you there, mate. Don't kill me, please."
Yeah, I remember once I went diving and went through this. It was kind of this cave system made of coral. It was really cool, and I got inside it, and then looked around and noticed that there were just moray eels everywhere, and they'd been sitting in the coral when I went in, but when I got inside, they all started moving out and were clearly very unhappy that I was there. It's really hard to swim backwards very quickly, but I managed. It's a giant teeth. Anyway, we should be talking about Finnish animals.
Wait, Jake. I found this fucking bird, man. I found this bird.
Yeah. Is this the mega cassowary?
Click on this link in the chat. This is so funny. For
on Discord?
Yeah, no, on Riverside. I think I just said just then. See if it goes through. It's not going through. I guess I'll send it on disc. I'll just tell you what the fucking bird is called. It's called Genioris, Genyoornis. The small Genioris was about 2 meters tall. This thing looks like a giant fucking chicken just ready to peck your head off. Oh, and the large Dromornis was 3 meters tall. It's 3 meter tall fucking bird. Fuck that bird. That's so cool. I wish there was still megafauna. Oh well. We should move on. Maybe Pentti's got a point. Maybe we fucked up.
Yeah. Well, no, but we can use technology for this.
Maybe
he was saying we should stop technology. I think we should lean into technology for bringing back megafauna.
So our next major topic is forests. He has this one.
He loves old forests.
He loves old forests, and I am very partial to old forests. I'm kind of disappointed in some of the Tasmanian and Victorian, New South Wales forests that have suffered so much damage. But there are some that are still have the old trees. For people who ever come to Australia, there's an amazing forest about 4 hours north of Sydney called Gondwana, the Gondwana National Forest. And it's amazing. There's amazing old, multi-hundred-year-old trees. Fucking awesome.
Most of his forest essays are talking about how he doesn't like the logging industry. And he says that they're liars. I think he would really fit in they're paying off politicians. Sorry?
I think that he would really fit in Tasmania.
Yeah,
there's a very big logging industry here. It's a backbone of Tasmanian economy, but obviously there's also a lot of people who are really into conservation and stuff who really hate the logging industry.
Yeah, most of the things from these chapters are probably not worth going into in too much detail because he basically just says the forestry industry chops down trees, doesn't care about repopulating the forests it destroys. It lies in its statistics to make it look like Finland's forests are okay, but they're actually all fucked.
Yeah.
They pay off politicians to allow themselves to make more money. Yeah.
Nothing groundbreaking.
Not really. Like, this part's not that interesting.
We can just say forests are great, logging industry sucks. Let's go into the third part, which is animals. Which, I'm going to say that even in this part, he didn't really say anything that unpredictable.
No.
Some of
I
the
could
stuff
see
I actually
most of it
agreed with
coming.
anyways, or at least if you've read Peter Singer's stuff, you might be sort of already familiar with some of the ideas.
Yeah, so when he talks about things like how hunting for just for fun, not for food, is sick, yeah, I don't really disagree with that. I think hunting, if you're going to eat the animal, is fine. Like, that's a pretty honest way to eat meat.
Mm.
If you're just doing it so that you can say you've killed this particular animal, that's pretty fucking weird, actually.
Yeah, fucking eat it.
Yeah. Like people who go and shoot birds with buckshot or something like that.
That's lame.
Just because they can. Because, like, you can't eat something if it's full of buckshot. That's just like, it's just teeth. Weird. Like, shoot clay pigeons or something. Like, yeah, if you're on a farm and you're trying to stop birds from eating,
have you done any hunting?
Your crops or something like that, fine. But if you're going out hunting with a shotgun to shoot birds just for fun, that's just a weird thing to do.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things.
So I didn't mind that when he was talking about that.
I would have thought a couple of 100 years ago, not to, I don't know about the whole like chronological relativism with morals, but sort of like think, okay, so 200 years ago, I'm not going to think like probably pretty common or whatever. Probably lots of people did it. I don't know. Like these days, just like, what are you doing, man? Like, if you're just going out there, shoot the bird. Leave the fucking bird alone. Go and shoot a target. Yeah. Unless you're going to eat.
Go and shoot a target, or shoot an animal and eat it.
Shoot an animal and eat it, or even better, get into bow hunting, because then that's way more hardcore. But if you're going to be a fucking pussy and use a gun.
Well, I get it, like going and shooting stuff. Like, guns are fun. But
guns are fun.
Yeah, like eat the animal.
Or if you're going to use a gun, use a real gun. Use a fucking grenade launcher or a mortar. bomb the kangaroos. Declare war on the kangaroos. It's like those
leave IEDs in their feeding plants. Feeding places. Leave them by bodies of water. Landmines for kangaroos.
Like there's these,
gotta really show them who's boss.
There's these farmers, because in Australia, Australia is fucking huge, as people probably know. I don't know. I think other people, when they come to Australia, don't realize how fucking big Australia is until they get here.
I think oftentimes I've found it's often Europeans underestimate the size of Australia.
It's really big.
They'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to drive to Perth from Melbourne."
Good luck.
It's like,
with that.
I mean, you can, but it's going to take a while.
Yeah, it's like it's the middle of December. It's like it's 35 degrees inside.
Yeah, it's like you actually need to pack food and water if you want to do this.
Yeah, there's these properties in some parts of like central Queensland that are so big it'll take you like 4 hours in a helicopter to fly across the entire property. And they've got these just vast sums of land that they run cattle on and stuff, but they also have huge like at times kangaroo issues. There's just so many kangaroos. These motherfuckers like jump in helicopters and like fly over them with with their rifles, and you see these farmers like
with a rifle
hanging out the
shoot
side of
them.
the rifles with hanging out the side of a helicopter with a rifle. It's pretty hectic. Yeah. And those are like very low flying craft as well. Like it must be super fucking dangerous. Anyways.
Yeah, but it's also so flat in a lot of that part of the world. It's
yeah, so there's not much chance of just like a rock formation coming out of the ground.
It's like
you can see everything.
If you're going to hit the ground,
around.
then you were pointing at it. It's not like you're going to be surprised by a hill.
Yeah,
You probably see a hill from like 30 k's away if you're standing on the ground.
Fuck all Australia.
He actually he talks about so he really loves native species to Finland.
Yeah.
And with introduced species to Finland, he says if they don't interfere with the native species, then they're okay. He can tolerate them. But if they're damaging, then he says you should just kill them. I quote, "Unscrupulously stern rules must be applied to foreign predators, both those which were imported and those which crossed the border themselves. We can probably tolerate the importation of alien species as long as they do not harm the native ones. But if the existence of any native species is threatened in order to secure the well-being of imported animals, if goshawks are threatened because of pheasants, for instance, or lynxes because of white-tailed deer, then the environmentalist's verdict must be irrevocable." Just kill them. And this comes on to one of his real hates. So he doesn't like fat people, as we've established, but also, I quote, "The worst animal in Finland is a domestic animal, an angel of death imported from Egypt, the cat." He really does not like cats. And look, I understand the negative effects of cats on basically any animal population that comes into contact with them. But I also love cats and think that they're one of the best, if not the best species on Earth. So I'm very conflicted here.
Supremely evolved apex predators doesn't mean that we should like nerf the
They're
environment.
just good at what they do, which is just tearing limb from limb any animal that they can get their claws on while it's still alive, and then slowly devouring it and leaving its head in your shoe. That's what they're good at, and they've evolved. They're very well evolved to do that.
And they're good at sitting there with bread on their face. They're good at jumping on things. They're good at trying to jump on things and then falling off. They're really good at like tapping you on the hand. They're really good at just like looking at you like you're an idiot. I fucking love cats. They don't give a shit.
Yeah.
There's heaps of rabbits.
He does make an interesting point where he says that environmentalists really shouldn't call themselves environmentalists unless they're profoundly anti-cat. And it's interesting that he makes the point that cats are just they're not native to Finland, but also they're just too good predators. He says they don't belong in Finland because they basically just outcompete everything else. Nothing else can handle
fuck
cats.
up all the other animals. Hey, that's what happens in Australia as well. They'll fuck up all the other animals in Australia.
Yeah, cats are a real problem.
Really
he says, this is a good quote. "The cat simply remains a grievance to be rooted out." This is a good bit because this links together his respect for tradition, but how he has to balance it with environmental concerns. He says, "Sure, cats are linked to some solid traditions, but so is spitting on the floor and tobacco. In any case, cats must be got rid of. I believe that the only positive invention of mankind was the domestication of animals, particularly the horse, cow, and dog." So it says, even though there are some good traditions linked to cats, you've got to kill them. So his conservatism is overruled by his environmentalism. I find that interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. My only gripe with him is that I'm not fully convinced that cats are actually domesticated. I just think
not really.
It's convenient to live with us.
It's gone halfway.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a funny so this is, I guess, one of the reasons I disagree with him is that and am I sympathetic to his point of view? I have my sympathies to his point of view, but it's not like species don't move around and stuff even in the absence of humans. Like, I know there's issues around like the ants, the Argentine ant, it's like fucking up all the other ant species all around the world, and they jumped on the boats, they jumped on like the shipping containers and stuff. And there's all the mice and the rats, like one of the species of rats, I think it's called the brown rat. It's like fucking up all the other species and getting around the world. I understand that, but if humans weren't here, that sort of stuff would be happening anyways, with like species breaking out of their sort of like historical niches and like maybe getting big and then retracting and stuff like that.
Yeah. I guess one of the differences that he points out is that with humans, it's accelerated.
Yes, it has accelerated. But
So, for example, bringing a cat to Australia, if it weren't for humans, then that, like, maybe it'd happen eventually, but it'd take a really long time for a cat to get from. I think cats were first domesticated in, I think, the southeast Mediterranean. Like, for a cat to get from there to Australia, like to Tasmania, it's basically just not going to happen without humans.
I agree that, for sure, like nobody, I don't think it would be sensible to disagree with the idea that we've accelerated it, but like, I don't know, like I really like rabbits in Tasmania. I know other people in Tasmania probably won't like it. I walk around and see the bunnies.
You're going to get shot for holding that opinion.
It's like, this is great. There's fucking bunnies here. How good are these? Or like, I
they
sometimes
are extremely cute.
And so it's just...
Well, that's a nice thing about living in Europe, because I can look at rabbits and appreciate them without feeling guilty that they're an invasive species.
Yeah, and
I can enjoy bunnies guilt-free here.
It's an implicit... there's an implicit sense of like... And I don't necessarily disagree with this. I just think if you're going to have this point of view, you should be consistent with it, which is like what I call the gardener idea of our relationship with nature, which is, say, for example, it's like with like native versus invasive species in Tasmania or New Zealand. Like New Zealanders are big on this as well. It's like, so what you're trying to do is like you're actively like intervening or like doing certain things to like keep the quote unquote natural environment in a way that you think it should be stabilized, which like like environments and niches change all the time and have been forever and always will. And especially in Australia, there's this like fallacy that it's like we should have an environment that looks like pre-colonial in some way. Which, you know, I do love native plants and stuff, but it's like, well, how do you even know what, say, like some part of Melbourne looked like 200 years ago or 300 years ago? And then secondly, like, is it exactly clear that we should try to return it in some way to that? I don't know. It's Or if you're going to do that, just admit that you're like shaping the world to what you want it to be, and then we can be like, okay, well, we want it to be like this. Yeah.
Then there is also the deeper point, and this is not just something that Pentti Linkola doesn't really address, but environmentalism in general, where that separation of humans from the natural world. Like, I don't really know how you can distinguish human beings from nature. Like, we are a natural species, which is just like we've evolved this mental capacity that allows us to shape our environment in a way that other animals can't. But it's not as if we're suddenly stopped being natural. Like, we're just really well adapted to shape things around us.
Yeah, it's really weird, hey? It's like, it's this line of, I guess the words that you'd see would be like artificial / man-made and natural, or like, yeah. And I don't know, I guess it's weird, because I do love forests and diving and all that, and I do think that there's value in like protecting certain parts of nature. I just don't have this kind of almost, would it be rude if I called it infantile? I think it's at times infantile.
I just don't think it's very thought through.
Yeah.
How you separate humanity from nature.
Why don't we just say like, hey, we want it to be the way that we think is good, and if that means like we clean up the oceans, then we do that, or if it means that like, hey, there's a particular bug that we don't like, we fucking like do something about it.
Yeah. Because of course, humanity, and especially in the past, for example, 100 years, the number of animals going extinct has just been huge, largely as a result of human effects on the environment.
Idiom.
And yeah, I think probably for safety, like for not collapsing the biosphere, we should slow that down or try to stop it. But at the same time, it really is actually humans just outcompeting other species.
Yeah.
You can talk about whether it's something that should be slowed down or stopped. And I think that's a reasonable argument to have. But to act like it's just this absolutely unprecedented thing fundamentally, that one species will outcompete another when it moves into its environmental niche, it's just kind of weird. It's just this thing of totally separating human beings from the natural world, which I think is arbitrary.
Yeah, it's really weird. Occasionally other species like have breakouts, like trilobites.
The sheer ability of human beings to outcompete other species is something that we haven't seen on Earth before.
It's really cool.
But I think it's a difference in degree. It's not a difference in quality.
But directionally, I do have sympathy for, like as you sort of alluded to, getting some of this like damage, environmental damage. Like I'm very pro progress. I like mining. I like building stuff. I like buildings. I like technology and all that sort of stuff. However, I guess as we become more sophisticated and knowledgeable, like can we do that stuff whilst minimizing some of the other negative effects? Like, yeah, I guess that's a question worth having.
And I think that'd be a good thing to do.
The difference between that sort of stuff and what Linkola is saying is, this isn't a quote from Linkola. It's somebody else who I can't remember who it was, but an academic who I'm just substituting in this quote because I think it represents Linkola well. Is the guy said something along the lines of, I don't care about what value, say, a particular environment or like, part of the world has from the human perspective. I think the environment or the biosphere has innate value independent of whether or not it's good for humans. And it's on that basis that I think humans should stop impacting things. No, that I don't care at all about whether or not it's good for humans. And I guess that's like a principled stance. He's consistent, which I can respect. Like I don't agree, I don't share it, but it's principled and consistent.
Yeah. The question, if something is threatening to humans, human beings as animals, like why wouldn't we remove the threat?
Well, he doesn't care about this particular guy is like, no, it's like who cares about humans? That's not what I'd care about. It's like, okay, well, I don't know. I'm sure, again, another person I wouldn't invite to a party. What about chickens? Chickens. What do you reckon about chickens?
I've just found a really interesting quote that juxtaposes his which situates him more on the conservative, like to an extent, the conservative end of politics, as opposed to the progressive end, because I've noticed that broadly speaking, people who lean towards progressivism view humans as sort of a tabula rasa, which can be improved upon and perfected. Like you can perfect the human mind so long as you have the right educational systems, you have the right political systems, the right incentives for people to follow. Whereas people who are more conservatively inclined often regard human nature as more or less fixed, and you create institutions so that you can restrain the worst bits of people's natures and encourage the better aspects. However, those worse aspects will always be present no matter how good your political systems are. And he's got a quote here which I think which declares which side of that divide he sits on. So he says, "The biologist must always be wary of any shift in the morality of one nation or the whole of humanity towards either compassion or cruelty. Sooner or later, these shifts will be found to be merely transient, ideologically conditioned fluctuations. The biologist will then have to affirm his argument once more. Basic human nature will not change, certainly not in 100 or 1,000 years. Besides, exceptional ethical choices, pacifism for instance, among conservationists, are usually made only by small minorities, even when the ethical standard in question is at the peak of popularity." And I found it interesting that here he really does seem to be declaring for that view that human nature probably won't change. No matter what the current fashions are, it's always going to be there. Just another reason why he's an interesting environmentalist, because he's really not approaching this from a left-wing perspective.
Yeah, I I liked it. Refreshing. Found it really refreshing to consume some.
Yes, this is good for the
that
podcast because it is refreshing. It's something different. It's not just some dude whining about race mixing or just the stuff we usually read.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think human nature is fixed, so I disagree with him on that. But if you had that conception in your mind, then I think like how he's reasoning from that basis is, I guess, not something that I would have, like, I don't really have a big problem with it. It's informative. It's informative to see how he views the world.
All right, what were you wanting to talk about? You said something about chickens.
Oh, chickens, yeah. He just has this thing where he's talking about, like, it's called joyful chickens and sad, and he's just talking about, like, buying free-range eggs versus, like, caged eggs and, like, the atrocity of caged animals and, like, certain farming practices. Which, again, like, I don't want to be boring because you'd kind of, like, it's very easy to predict that somebody like Pentti Linkola would have these views. But I guess I just wanted to talk about it in this one because I remember back in the day, like, you were vegetarian, and I think it was partially to do with, like, animal rights stuff. And I had my vegetarian. I had
for quite a few years.
Bouts of being vegetarian and stuff at times, and was wondering, like, where your thoughts are now with regards to that stuff.
So fundamentally, I don't have a problem with humans eating animal products. It's what I have a problem with is the dishonesty where people will eat meat that comes from a supermarket, nice and well prepared, clean, it's bloodless. But then we'll go out and do things like say that hunting for food is barbaric and disgusting and only awful people do it. Or they'll flip out at the suggestion that someone might kill an animal for them to eat. I don't like that sort of dishonesty. I think if you eat meat, then acknowledge that this was a living creature that could experience, that had wants and desires, that had some sort of internal life, and acknowledge that it was killed so that you can eat it. And I think if you're okay with that, and if you acknowledge that an animal died for you to eat, if you're willing to kill an animal to eat it, then fine. Eat meat. Go for it.
Yeah, I even would be sympathetic towards the arguments about claim that hunting meat is potentially even more ethical than eating certain kinds of farmed meat from the effects on the animal. Yeah.
Yeah. He does bring this up. He's got a few quotes where he talks about how the modern animal rights movement just focuses on the death of animals. So they're obsessed with making sure that animals are slaughtered in a humane, painless way. And he says that this is just silly because in nature... So he does this thing where he says, because it happens in nature, then this is how it should happen. He says in nature, the deaths of animals are often brutal, horrifically painful. Yeah. But he says these animals lived in freedom for perhaps years, and while their death might be painful, that death might take minutes. And so it's not actually proportionally that important. Whereas with a factory farm, it's the reverse. It's they live in misery for their whole lives, but they have a quick, painless death that takes seconds. So he says, of course, it's better to have a painful death, but a free, happy life than the reverse. But we seem to be pushing in the opposite direction. And I think there is something to this. I'm not going to go and say, okay, we need to make methods of slaughtering animals more painful.
Jack out here advocating for, hey, these animals are getting off too light, man. We need to put them under.
Yeah, we need to saw off their heads or something like that while they're still alive. But I do think there really is something. It is somewhat perverse that people will be okay, like not okay with factory farming, because you find very few people who will look at it and go, "Oh yeah, I'm all about that." But plenty of people will consume the products of factory farming.
I'm just like, fucking jack it up, electrocute them.
I'm all about it.
Put some Can we just kick
Show
him
him
in
who's
the face?
boss.
Can I come to the factory and just punch him?
Spit on them. Piss on the animals.
Spit on dirty little fucking chicken. I'm going to eat you later.
You like that,
Fucker.
don't you?
You don't, you little fucking
Bitch.
chicken. You're going to fucking stick my dick in your body.
Yeah,
What the fuck am I
but
talking about?
people seem in some way to be okay with animals living like that, but then get really up in arms and they're like, oh, were they slaughtered humanely? It's like, maybe they weren't slaughtered humanely, but what in their lives was humane? So I think Pentti Linkola has a fair point with this. That's why I think things like hunted meat are just ethically so much easier to deal with. It's like, yep, if someone went and shot a deer in the woods, even if the shot wasn't so good and the deer took a little bit of time to die, or they had to cut its throat to kill it, that deer lived what was a much better life, almost certainly, than a chicken or a pig or something like that kept in a factory farm.
And obviously, if it's a good shot, straight in the heart, like that thing's going to be dead.
Yeah, if you shoot in the heart, then yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, hunted meats. Plus, it normally tastes really good as well.
Yeah, if you like the taste of gamey meat, I find it tastes like liver. Or it tastes more like liver than otherwise.
Just give me some of the fucking Jack here. Alpha Wolf gets the fucking liver.
Okay, what else have we got? Yeah, he keeps talking about introduced species to Finland. More about how hunting. He has no problem with hunting or fishing. Interestingly, he does talk about the Bible and Christianity a lot. Do you know, was he a Christian?
I wouldn't be surprised if he was. Maybe I'll just look at it real quickly.
He talks about vegetarians and vegans. Like, long story short, he thinks veganism's a silly luxury lifestyle. Here we go. Here's a quote that clarifies a lot of what he talks about. Again, this is one of those quotes that basically sums up the whole book. He says, "The intrinsic value of animals, however, and the degree to which they are seen as inviolable beings depends on their status, their position, that is, in the biosphere and the ecosystem. The whole, the system, the maximum amount of species and diversity is the most sacred thing. The second most important thing is the total number of individuals for every given species across the entire Earth and in every specific area. The greatest, most beautiful, and most important value on Earth is the richness of nature. Actually, for me, this is the most important thing in the whole universe, as my consciousness, identity, and interests do not extend to other celestial bodies." So he's all about the diversification of life. It's interesting too, he derives from this a few values. He says that the more rare an animal is that occupies a particular niche, the more valuable each individual of that species is, because those few individuals are the few creatures which occupy a niche. Therefore, the greater numbers exist of a given species, the less important each individual is. Later in the book, he uses this to attack the notion of human rights, and he says, well, there are just so many humans. How could there possibly be human rights? He's quite consistent in his thinking. You can hear something like his belief that occupying as many niches as possible is what should happen and is what is good. And from that derive that there are too many humans and that devalues the human individual. He's consistent.
Yeah. Consistency's always good. He gets points for that.
Especially when it ends up in a effectively fascist state, exterminating humans.
So just on the atheism thing, on the religion thing. So it turns out, no, he was an atheist and he was opposed to certain types of Lutheranism, schools of Christianity that forbade contraception and promoted large families, which he thought was bad. He was like, no, we need contraceptions and we need to ban large families and introduce child limits. So he was against the anti-contraception Christians, which again, is like, I guess that's consistent. So maybe his essay on animal rights in the Bible is perhaps just like pointing out to Christians the case. But I found that essay kind of like weak anyways. So maybe there you go.
Yeah, well, I basically skipped over it.
Yeah.
Here we go. I've got a quote about human rights that's good. The book's slowly getting spicier. Life, which is hierarchic by nature, demands that we extend this value from mammals to lower vertebrates and invertebrates, all the way down to the paramecium and amoeba. But just as necessary should be the classification of people according to their degree of humanity. In other words, according to the extent to which they possess those abilities that represent the unique abilities of their species and define the place of man in relation to other animals. Intelligence, wisdom, culture, emotion, empathy. Physical deficiencies do not affect intrinsically human qualities like spiritual life or the exercise of the mind. Retardation with respect to emotional life or intelligence, however, is another matter. Some individuals in this respect are on the level of chimpanzees, some of the beaver, some of the pipit. Some totally deficient individuals cannot even be compared to the most primitive expressions in the animal kingdom. Why should a higher value and better rights be assigned to these people rather than to the chimpanzee, beaver, or pipit? And when I read this, what he's basically saying is your degree of humanity is concordant with your degree of agreement with Pentti Linkola.
Yeah. How much do you agree with Pentti? You're more wise.
And I like that.
All those
I like
things,
that he's basically identifying his beliefs as the measure by which your humanity is judged. It's a very confident move.
In the decimation of the species.
Very confident.
Like all those 5 mental attributes that he specified, it's like he knows, that he thinks he's maxed out all of them.
Yeah, he's min-maxed his build.
To be wise and intelligent
those
and empathetic.
He's and he also is getting more and more into his worries about the population explosion on Earth in this part of the book. It is interesting that he says, so I quote from a refresher course in the State of the World from 1992. So what do statistics tell us about the population explosion will be divided, about how the population explosion will be divided geographically? For the next few decades, which is probably to say for the remaining time allotted to humanity, the bulk of this explosion will take place in industrial countries, Europe, Japan, and the United States. And it's interesting that this is a part that Pentti Linkola just got flat out wrong. So he was saying, he had this whole bit where he was talking about how he is not expressing opinions, he's expressing statistical facts. And then says that the human population explosion post-1992 will be in Europe, Japan, and the US. Whereas Europe has a big demographic problem. Japan has a big demographic problem. The United States still has a growing population. I think the native-born birth rate is still above it's like 2.03 or something like that, which is growing. I think it's natively still slightly above that or maybe just below, so it's not as bad as Europe and Japan. But no, most of the growth of the human population is from places like Nigeria, places like Egypt.
Yeah, Nigeria's had a fucking
just got
huge amount of growth. It's amazing.
Flat out wrong.
Yeah, you fucked up. I want there to be more growth. I was telling my girlfriend, like, we were having the kid conversation, and I was like, all right, what's the maximum number of children that you're willing to push out of your body? Like 5? Can we do 5?
You're going to become a Catholic.
5 kids. She's like 3 max. I'm like, all right, well, we can adopt some kids as well then. Come on, we need more people.
Well, I mean, it's pretty different for men because our contribution to children is basically the fun bit.
Yeah, look, that's why I double-checked with her first.
Break into a sperm bank and, just mix your genetic material with everything in there.
Just run around town with a
in
turkey
20
baster
years,
full
a
of my cum,
disturbing number of
squirting at
people start looking like Levi. The Levi phenotype is really overrepresented. Everyone looks like Levi in Australia.
Within 3 generations, there's more descendants of Levi than Genghis Khan. Just infiltrate all the sperm banks in the world. He starts walking around with like bad, wiry fro hair.
Oh, he's got this bit about so he's known for his so-called lifeboat principle. he's got a quote here where he lays out the lifeboat principle. And I think he was quoting someone else, George Henrik von Wright, who was writing to Linkola, summarising a part of one of Linkola's books that he liked. So Linkola is quoting someone who was paraphrasing him when he says, "What to do when a ship carrying 100 passengers has suddenly capsized and only one lifeboat is available for 10 people in the water? When the lifeboat is full, those who hate life will try to pull more people onto it, thus drowning everyone. Those who love and respect life will instead grab an axe and sever the hands clinging to the gunwales." That's basically Linkola in a nutshell.
I really like that bit. I mean, I'm not about it. Like I'll pull the other person onto the
I'm
lifeboat.
all about it.
But I like his
so long
language.
as I'm in the lifeboat, I'm all about it.
If you're in the
If I'm
lifeboat
in the
first.
water, then it's disgusting. If I'm in the water, then I oppose it, and I think it's a horrific thing to believe.
It's an act
But if
against
I'm one of those
humanity,
10 people
unless I'm on the
lifeboat,
lifeboat.
you bet your fucking ass I like Pentti Linkola.
Would you rather have your hands chopped off and drown, or would you rather spend an unknown amount of time on a lifeboat with Pentti Linkola?
Like, with Pentti Linkola?
yeah. Pentti Linkola.
That's a
There's
good
no
question.
guarantee you're going to get rescued.
Do I want to
you
spend
know.
that much time in an enclosed environment with Pentti Linkola, who is presumably armed with an axe? Am I going to die either way is basically the question I'm hearing.
You just go out fast or go out
Would I
slow?
rather drown or be murdered by Pentti Linkola in a lifeboat?
These
So
are
the thing
important
is,
questions.
okay, how likely is Pentti to kill you with the axe? Do I get an axe?
pretty fucking high, I reckon. He might just change his mind and go from like, all right, I thought we could support 10 people, but actually we can only support 2. It just axes everybody else.
What if I kill him in his sleep?
See, now you're starting to
Pentti
think,
closes
Jack.
his eyes and then suddenly finds himself in the water.
Bring a cat on the boat.
Yeah, well then he'll just immediately kill you.
The cat will probably kill you first. Like, drown
Yeah.
you on the way up. Cold, dead eyes of the cat staring down at you above the water. Just holds your face down with its little paw. It's like, where did it get all the strength from?
Here we go. This is a good quote where he talks about his view of humans. He says, "It is not difficult for me to envisage man returning to his place in a harmonious biosynosis. Might this be due to a greater clarity on my part regarding the notion of man? In my eyes, humanity is an infinitely grand species. I too fight for its survival. Yet, I believe that human brilliance manifests itself only in flashes, among rare individuals. For this reason, humanity as a whole is enormously destructive. The creation of something as devastating as Western culture, which is now allowed to spread throughout the world, offers sufficient proof of this fact." So he likes people, but there are just way too many of us. And it's good in this quote also, he brings up his notion that there are very few people who are worthwhile, that most people aren't very good at all, and really exist to be led by those handful of insightful, intelligent, empathetic people like Pentti Linkola.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. He also talks about how bad he goes full antinatalist, or not full antinatalist, but he goes a bit antinatalist. He talks about how we need more birth control, how abortions are good, and also we need forced abortions, forced sterilizations, and infanticide, so that we can limit the reproductive rate of couples to one child per fertile woman for at least a few generations.
Yeah, which is interesting. It's interesting that he's not just straight up, let's just do a mass extermination of all the people. And he's more like, all right, I've got a plan.
Yeah, it's more passive.
I've got a slow, it's a deceleration, or actually a negative acceleration. And we're going to like slowly decrease the population through reducing like the birth rates.
His approaches to depopulation do tend to be more passive. So yeah,
he's a very
prevent
he's a
people from
reasonable
having
guy.
more than one child.
He's trying to solve problems here. He's like,
Yeah.
yes,
And then he's got bits about
Holocaust are bad, but, you know.
European foreign policy, or the foreign policy of high income countries, where he says, okay, they should just cut their aid budgets to zero and cut immigration from poor countries to zero, because those two things, the of immigration and foreign aid, basically increase the carrying capacity of poorer countries with respect to their population beyond that of what it would be otherwise. And he says, okay, cut the aid budget so people, for example, in Egypt starve and die. Don't let them leave their countries and come to countries in the West which have enough money to support them, because that's also it's increasing the carrying capacity in some way, or the ability of populations from those countries to survive beyond what it should be. Yeah, it's just so many ways he's so out of step with my conception, or maybe my bias, as to what an environmentalist looks like.
Yeah,
because oftentimes I do find this interesting. Environmentalists will support policies that increase the human population in a lot of parts of the world where environmental destruction is taking place. So Pentti Linkola, in that respect, is probably more coherent than a lot of environmentalists.
Yeah, I like him for his coherence. He is way more coherent.
Yeah, where he basically says, and this is what many more mainstream environmentalists say, yep, human beings are the cause of a lot of environmental destruction. But unlike them, Pentti Linkola is willing to follow that all the way to the end and say, there are too many humans and we need to reduce the number of humans.
Yeah, he just gets it. He's just like, this is the logical consequence. Like, I'm just going to own it. Let's get sterilizing, fellas. You see, at least, like, if you sterilize people, like, they can still, you know, have orgies and stuff, I suppose. So, you know, it's not the worst, like, fascist regime.
Yeah, well, there'd also need to be local orgies, because transportation around the country will be restricted.
Local forest orgies.
What about he's got this section called Women as the Protectors of Life from 1996, and I found this was interesting. He's mentioned a few times that he just thinks women are stronger than men when it comes to things that he really values. And this chapter was very explicitly about that. It was when he went to Russia, to the region of Karelia, and he saw that all of the men there are dissolute drunks, unemployed, just doing nothing with their lives, complete fucking burnouts. And this is because of the cultural collapse taking place there as a result of globalization, of liberal culture, etc., etc. But women, because they have stronger souls than men, were tolerating it better. While the men are drinking themselves to death, smoking, women don't do this nearly as much. Instead, they're still involved in the community, in families. They're taking care of the kids. They're the ones working. They're taking part in cultural events while the men are just being burnouts. I thought that was interesting. He's not taking part in any of this lame, progressive, PC, men and women are equal stuff. He's just saying, nah, women are better. They just have stronger souls. When a man hits trouble, he turns into a drunk.
So is this going to be gynocratic eco-fascism, do you reckon? Or do you reckon because Pentti was like so self-interested, he'd be like, I get to be top dog, but then my entire Senate is going to be women, strong-souled women.
So maybe he doesn't state the gender makeup of the handful of elevated individuals who'll be wielding uncontested power over society. But at least from this chapter, you would assume that there'll probably be more women than men.
I don't know what I like. I'm pretty sold on Pentti's vision. Like, forest orgies, more women than dudes. Like, I don't know. Presumably, lots of them are Scandinavian, so they're probably really good looking.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be allowed to go there because they shut the borders.
They shut the borders, yeah. Yeah, true. And I would be an immigrant.
That's my only problem with it.
That would be.
I want to be there for it.
But this is only for Finland. Does he really care about the rest of the world doing it in his final plan? Is it mainly directed towards... No, it's directed towards the whole population, I suppose. So everybody's just going to have to stay in there.
the whole world, but he's most interested in Finland.
So it's just like whichever country you happen to be in, presumably, when Pentti Linkola's global government takes control, that's the country that you've got to stick to if you happen to be one of the people who gets to survive and you don't get your hands chopped off.
Yeah.
So
I'm not sure if he's advocating
Italy,
for global
maybe?
government,
You
because
wanna
he
get stuck in
seems
Italy
to
if
want
it's the
each
end of the
country
world.
to be quite
Italy's pretty
sealed
nice.
off from each other. How about, he's got this bit about hyper-individualism. So he views us as too selfish and individualistic, which doesn't come as a surprise, really. And he views it as this, one of the worst aspects of Western culture. And he views Western culture really as the lowest point in human history. He says, freedom here means the freedom to consume, to exploit, to tread upon others. All rights, even the most seemingly beautiful, women's rights, children's rights, rights for the disabled, only express one thing: me, me, me. Pure selfishness has been given a new name, self-realization, now considered the noblest of all morals. Words like responsibility, duty, humility, self-sacrifice, nurturing and care are always spat upon if they still happen to be mentioned. He's interesting. This is where the more fascist elements of eco-fascism start coming in, because he wants people to be much less focused on the individual and much more communally focused, and much more focused on serving each other as well as the small coterie of elevated leaders who tell them what to do. So when this is called eco-fascism, it's not fascism in the sense of someone with purple hair on Twitter doesn't like what you're saying, so you get called a fascist. It actually has a lot in common with fascism.
Oh yeah, no, it's
which
actual
is quite
fascism.
a communitarian
Yeah, no.
ideology.
It's definitely fascism. It's just eco-fascism. It's really, it's really weird, isn't it? It's quite an
it's something new
very
that I
refreshing.
haven't come across before.
Never genuinely come across eco-fascism. It was just so weird for me because directionally with regards to some points, just as somebody who likes parks and stuff, like national parks, I was like, oh man, you had me at like how good a forest, and you really lost me at the like genocide thing. Like somewhere in between those two things.
He overreached.
I was coming along for the ride there for a second, mate.
Yeah. He's got this bit also about international charity. So I've already mentioned about how he thinks we should cut aid budgets to let people in poorer countries die to reduce the human population. But he views what he calls species solidarity, the extension of love to faraway populations of humans just because they happen to be the same species as you, as unnatural. He really does seem to say that we should only care about people who are close to us, both physically and in terms of relationships. Care more about people who are family or from our local community. And that this form of international charity, of giving money and aid to people you've never met, don't know anything about, is bizarre and twisted. And it just spoils the ecosystems by letting more people live. It lets populations be denser than they should be, squanders natural resources. It's just bad for life, like life all over the world. What about that section where he talks about how good Osama bin Laden is?
Yeah.
It's The Bullseye, which was written on the 26th of September, 2001. He says, those who died in the attack were not simply humans, they were Americans, and not ordinary Americans either, but the priests and priestesses of the supreme god of this age, the dollar. The passengers of the domestic flights are not a valid sample of humanity either, but a wealthy, busy, environmentally damaging, and world-devouring portion of mankind. He goes on further to say, on these grounds, it may be assumed that third world activists are behind the bombings in New York and Washington. These people are waging a desperate battle for their fatherland and faith against an overpowering, gigantic enemy. not unlike the Finns during the Winter War. Regardless of how alien their religion or culture may be, they certainly deserve all our sympathy. Opposition within the United States is also strong. The case of the Unabomber springs to mind here. His planned, thoughtful model for an alternative society was presented to the Finnish public with a translation of his manifesto. Domestic opposition in the US, however, will hardly have the energy and ability to carry out an operation such as the one we have witnessed in New York. The skill, competence and courage behind the attack has stunned even Western military experts. That quote's good because he gives a shout out to Teddy K, sorry.
We had a double
Ted
cameo.
Kaczynski.
Ted Osama cameo.
This is the anime crossover we've always wanted.
Pentti is doing a shout out to our boys Osama.
Shout out to Osama, shout out to the Unabomber.
This is weird. Crossovers between different parts.
Yeah, but
of
he liked 9/11. He thought it was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, he liked a lot of stuff where people died. He's just like, yeah, some people died. Great, fantastic, good on him. I wish
he calls it magnificent during this chapter.
Pretty crazy, isn't it? It's just very like. I think does it map with age as well? Do you think he gets more and more extreme in his points of view, like towards the later 90s and earlier 2000s?
I'm not sure. I wasn't paying enough attention. I don't think so, actually. I think he was pretty extreme from the get-go, at least with the things he's written in this book.
Yeah, it just comes out.
Because I assume he's written much more than what is presented here.
All right, he's prolific. There's heaps.
He also 9/11 was also cool because not just did it deliver a punch in the nose to the United States, but it also slowed down air traffic, at least for a time. It slowed down foreign trade. It led to a real decline in stock prices. It allowed for more surveillance and more police action to interfere with business, to slow down business a bit. And he said that all these things gave nature a bit of extra time. So he, for multiple reasons, liked 9/11 a lot.
Yeah, again, it's refreshing to read somebody who's at least consistent with his point of view and isn't just like sort of scattered. He's just like, yep, fucking hate people. Yep, good on you, Osama. Like, yep, plane's bad, technology's bad. You know what you're getting when you read Pentti.
And I just came across something. So earlier I said that him separating humanity from nature seemed a bit arbitrary. He does address that. I'd forgotten this. He says that humanity is no longer part of nature because it's broken free of the equilibrium of populations as regulated by food chains. So it's no longer part of nature because there's not that negative feedback loop anymore. What do you think of that?
As in, do I agree with it? Or do I think it's just like an interesting idea?
Well, what are your thoughts on him saying that something is part of nature insofar as it is regulated by the equilibrium as established by food chains and its effect on the birth rate?
No, I don't really think that there's those sorts of equilibriums. Like, environments are changing all the time. When those things do seem to persist, like stable sorts of like environments, it's like that does happen. Like a good example is probably like crocodiles. Like, they've been very stable genetically for like 200 million years, and like maybe they were more common previously, maybe not. But it's like, that's not necessarily like inherently good. It's very interesting, but there's lots of other examples of like animals that are constantly like, like for example, like the flora of a rainforest is highly competitive and is like churning through different species quite a bit of like insects and fungi and stuff. It's very competitive.
Yeah, I still think it's a bit of an arbitrary way of separating humans from nature, or being able to say that humans are no longer part of nature.
Yeah.
Because still the reason why, like, we're still to an extent part of food chains. It's just that we're out competing everything else.
Yeah. And they're, yeah, that's just something I did. I did a university project, like comparing mathematical models to like different sorts of computer modeling techniques, and I was looking at like animal populations, and there's these older models that use like partial differentials and stuff that assume like an equilibrium point, but the assumptions in those models just like don't actually have a correspondence to reality. And when you create like a computer model, where it's more like, they're called agent-based models, where you say like you program these little agents and assign them to like a population. Like an agent might represent like a wolf, and another agent might represent a rabbit, and then you fill up like basically like a virtual sandbox and change conditions in the environment. Like there's a whole range of different like patterns in the changes in the virtual animals. Sometimes you have like dynamic equilibriums where they're oscillating around like what looks like a set point, but there's plenty of like configurations where they just don't, where like one of the species will just go extinct and stuff. And the problem with computer models, like I was just describing, like agent-based models, is that they don't take into account that there's actually evolution going on underneath. So like the animals aren't static over time, like they're actually changing as well a little bit. And if you ran it for enough generations, you'd actually have like changes in the morphology and stuff of the animal. So we're not even up to the point where we can model that. So there's nothing, I don't really think there's often that idea of like an equilibrium, a stable or even a dynamic equilibrium that ever really occurs, at least not over like very long periods of time. And the dominance of, or the rise of a species tends to like coincide with like a balance being disrupted.
Yeah, I guess like maybe Linkola would say that the rate at which this happens under humans is just so accelerated. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting. Like, it wasn't even, say, even if modern Homo sapiens are like 100,000 years old, or how many, whatever the estimate is now these days, we had a very small population for the vast majority of human history, or like human in the last 100,000 years or so. It's really only been maybe like the last 10,000 years, and especially the last couple of hundred years, where it's like exploded. And I guess we can't really tell what effects we're going to have or are having. Like, it's very open. Maybe it all goes to shit. Maybe we crash the planet into the sun or something.
Oh, he talks about how with wars, one of the problems has been that it's really just been between young men who kill each other and then leave the female populations intact. So the young men who survive the war can come back and impregnate all the women, and it's not going to hit the population hard in the long term. You're just going to get a drop for that one generation affected by war.
4D chess here.
But he's feeling hopeful about modern warfare, that it might, it seems to be targeting civilians more and more. And if you can kill a lot of young, fertile women during a war, that'd be good, because that'll really bring down the population in a more durable way. So he's got some optimistic parts of this book too. He's not just a pessimist.
That's quite an
Warfare
interesting.
could
I've never heard that
exterminate
argument
civilian
before.
populations too.
Like, at least that's novel.
Why modern warfare could be good.
It's a very novel perspective. It's quite a creative, if a little bit like, surly.
Yeah. He really doesn't like democracy. By this point in the book, he's coming out against it much more strongly. He says it's the worst of all societal systems. Because basically it just exists to give the inferior mass of humanity the comforts that they want. In his view, basically, your average human just wants to sit around and eat chocolate, watch flashing lights on a screen, to engage in petty titillation and the feeding of their desires. They want nothing more, and they're just going to vote for leaders who give them those sorts of things without thought for the future, for all life on Earth, for those sort of things. So he sees it as just the most irresponsible form of government you could possibly have.
I agree. I think we should institute Jack as Grand Dictator of the world.
Oh, yeah.
Grand Mufti. Planetary Mufti Jack.
Interplanetary mufti.
I don't know why. I just think that it would suit
He's got
you
this
more to
bit-
be a mufti. That's all.
A mufti, yeah.
Yeah. I
Rather
think it's
than a patriarch or a pope or something like that.
Yeah.
He's also got this bit about pacifism. He really doesn't like pacifism and non-violence. He says it's just nonsensical when there are 6 billion people on Earth choking the planet to death. He wrote this at a time when there were only 6 billion people.
Yeah. He's got a point.
And that
it's like, so what?
You often need
Expendable.
violence.
Yeah. Let's have more of it.
In this part too, he praises Osama bin Laden again because he says that Osama bin Laden was someone who saw the necessity of violence in prosecuting good causes. Okay, moving on. Actually, he's got this bit about competition. He really views competition as harmful, and in his ideal society, the educational system would be employed to stamp out any hint of a desire for competition in people. He says, most importantly, competition, which is nothing but the immoral subduing of others, must be disposed of in all areas of life. Even the thought of vying between nations or economical coalitions must be extinguished. No country is an enemy to be overcome. Domestic products are vital for all countries, and finished products must not be displaced by imports. He also says that the word for competition must be eliminated from the Finnish language. I do find it interesting though, because he often seems to say or hint that because something happens in the natural world, then it is good. Normatively, if something is occurring in the natural world, it should occur in human society. But the thing is, like in the natural world is brutal in its competition.
Yeah. Why shouldn't we model it after the animal world?
And this is one of the places where his consistency falls off a bit, in that if you're going to be all about the natural world, then you probably do have to be comfortable with not only competition, but competition to death.
He was doing so well with the consistency of his worldview. And now we found a chink in the armour.
This is what spoiled Pentti Linkola for me. I was an eco-fascist up until now. I was with him the whole way, but now it's just come crumbling down. I want eco-fascism, but with bloodthirsty competition. That's what I'm saying. Pentti Linkola was soft.
See who can be the most eco-fascist.
Yeah, it's an arms race. Who can be more extreme? What about that bit where he effectively proposes collectivized farming? He says, we need more people working as farmers, and we need to break up big farms so that more people can work on the land. And while I was reading this, I was thinking, okay, people have tried collective farms and it didn't work. But then, he foresaw this. He says, yes, this will lead to much less efficient farming practices, which will lead to less food, which will lead to a global famine, which is good.
He got you
this
there,
is a design feature, not a bug.
He got you there,
that you make less food. He got me. He saw my problem with it and said, yeah, you know what? I saw this coming, and it's good.
The problem with you, Jack,
we're going to have
that
less food.
You want to feed all the people. The trick is...
Exactly. He's got me there.
And here, Pentti Linkola,
I really liked that. Really liked that.
Comes back after a little.
That judo.
Yeah, he got you. He
got me. What about it's from a section from the chapter "Can We Survive? A Model for a Controlled Future" from 1999.
And this is the chapter that you can kind of just
subheading
read
in this.
if you want his overview.
Yeah, I'd say this is the part, if you want to learn about eco-fascism, that you should read. Because he just lays everything out very succinctly. It's quite nicely written. This is the part of the book that I'd say that I would recommend to people. He's got in this section a demographic plan, though, a good quote where he says, "The cornerstone of any population platform is the dismantling of the freedom of procreation, the most senseless form of individual freedom." He goes on to say, "Procreation should be licensed. On average, every woman should be allowed to bear only one child. This policy should be followed for several generations until a sustainable population is reached. The quality of the population must in all cases be taken into account as well. Procreation license would be denied to homes deemed genetically inadequate or unsuitable for the raising of children, whereas families capable of providing a stimulating environment for children would be granted several licenses. It's like with the fascism part, it's not hyperbolic to say that he's fascist. Like, he's even at the point where he's like, yeah, eugenics, that's sick. I'm all about that eugenics.
Yeah, and the state getting into people's like family planning and stuff.
Yeah.
So definitely not being... Actually, no, he identified with the word fascist. He was about fascism.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, I read a quote where he's like, yeah, fascist. Well, it didn't say that.
I didn't know that because I thought... I was under the impression that people called him eco-fascist just because of the... because of the obvious link between what he says and fascism. I didn't know he self-identified as fascist. Yeah, that would make sense.
He said... He said, we even have to be able to reevaluate fascism and recognise the service that philosophy made 30 years ago when it freed the earth from the weight of tens of millions of overeating Europeans, 6 million of them by an almost ideally environment-preserving means. So, I guess he didn't like actively disavow being a fascist. He was a fascist.
Yeah, he's like, the Holocaust was pretty good.
He was a Finnish nationalist eco-fascist. He wasn't really racist. Oh, he probably was racist. But at least in this particular book...
Hard to say, but...
He was definitely curmudgeonly.
Curmudgeonly? That's a very, very gentle way of saying that he viewed the Holocaust as a good thing.
He never went in...
But for different reasons.
He never went into
to, for example, Nazis or to Varg.
He never went into...
He's all about reducing the number of people on Earth, but he's quite even-handed when it comes to which humans are
just
removed.
Everyone.
He's like, look, I just want some humans to be gotten rid of.
And but I also don't think he ever went into like the local like new Sudanese restaurant or Vietnamese restaurant. Like I just have a suspicion he never went into those. If went is it Helsinki?
No, he liked native Finnish stuff too much.
Yeah, Helsinki. He never went into like the immigrant part of Helsinki and got him some fucking tasty kebabby. Fucking love it.
Oh, I've got a quote here. So he started talking about fat people again and started talking about the benefits of malnutrition. So, the opulent excess of fat, even obesity, which is widespread in our present society, would be decreased by regulating, controlling, and normalising the nutrition, vitamin, and hormonal levels of adolescents. A drop of 20 centimetres in the average height could realistically be achieved. The same goes for a drop of 20 kilos in the average weight. This is a very important step to be taken, and among one of the most humane ones, in order to reduce the demographic burden.
Yeah. He's thinking about like just all the benefits of famine, really. Like I think famine is just one of those things that really gets a bad rap, you know? People talk disparaging of famine, but you never hear famine speak back, you know? Famine's always the bigger man. But really, like, famine could do a lot for the world.
Yeah, we need to end this discrimination against famine. Against all the four horsemen of the apocalypse, actually, because which of the four horsemen would Pentti Linkola have a problem with? So war, he's already spoken out in favour of war, saying... Like, not only is war good for killing young men, but increasingly it's targeting civilians. So that's cool. Pestilence. He was talking about how he likes eating mold and stuff like that off his food. So, yeah, cool. He's all about pestilence. I'm sure he'd be all for a global pandemic, which really killed a lot of people. Like something way spicier than COVID.
Oh, I bet he would have loved pandemics, yeah.
So what have we got? War, pestilence, famine. Like he's already speaking out in defense of famine and death. Like obviously, that just in general, when applied to humans, is a good thing. So, Pentti Linkola is actually a fan of all four horsemen.
And do you reckon he likes horses? He probably likes horses.
Probably, so long as they're not damaging the Finnish environment.
Yeah, bareback.
In which case they would be exterminated.
Bareback.
I think he likes horses.
Yeah. So he might even be one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. He might try out for it. Do you reckon they do auditions? He's got a kind of horseman, like apocalyptic horseman face. You know, like he'd be great.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, I think
What
if
did he look
you
like?
saw him draped in a robe, like riding on a zombie steed out of the sky with a fucking trident, it would suit him.
And here we go. There's a picture of him hugging a tree.
Pentti Linkola. Pentti Linkola. Hug.
Oh, there's a photo of him with his shirt off.
Was he jacked?
Yeah, he was in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a picture of him with a horse. Yeah, he probably liked horses.
Fucking picture of him
Yeah, I
with
think he
like
liked
eagles
horses.
and hawks and stuff. He loves this shit.
Another picture of him hugging a tree.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I like
yeah.
him hugging trees. Can you just do that? Hug the tree. Less genocide, mate.
We need to abolish hydrocarbon fuels.
Oh, well, that's obvious. No, but everybody already knew that going in.
We need to largely bring electricity generation to an end. So this is one of the places where he intersects with the mainstream environmentalist movement. He does want to dismantle hydropower because it damages rivers and lakes. He really likes lakes.
I really like lakes as well. I think he's
He
on
also
something
thinks like we can pull carbon dioxide from the atmosphere at scale by absorbing it with vegetation. So
Well, that is
you
already
just
happening.
Plant so many more trees.
I think that's good.
And end the forestry industry to allow more trees to be grown. Interestingly, he does think that paper production should continue so that you can make newspapers and books, because you need these things for maintaining culture and society. But paper will become one of the most strictly regulated commodities because it comes from trees and trees are so valuable. It's also interesting, he says that you'd need in his ideal society a well-trained firefighting force to prevent forest fires while the forests are regrowing. So he's not saying, we need to just leave everything to nature. He's actually wanting to adjust certain things for certain ends. So right now he's saying we need to optimize for getting as many trees as possible to reduce the effects of climate change. I found that interesting.
I like forests and trees. It'd be cool if we had some more forest coming back. There's been a lot of forestation all over the world. That's why I'm sympathetic to some of the stuff he talks about. It's like, yeah, more forests. Forests are great.
In his ideal society, people are going to live in their natural areas. There are going to be no cars at all. Public transport will be available for long trips. Otherwise, people can get around by walking, by cycling, rowing, paddling, things like that. You'll have
paddling.
railroads
That's
for transporting people, but also for heavy transport. Or you can move things around by boat. His bit on foreign relations was good. So all international trade agreements are going to be cancelled. Most of what will be imported to Finland will be metals that aren't found in Finland. And salt, because he says the use of salt will increase a lot from food preservation because there won't be refrigeration.
Yeah, he's thinking about all the details.
He also says, I quote, products of handicraft, woodwork and foodstuff, such as fish and berries, will be used as exchange currency. So I'm assuming that there's not going to be any currency in Finland besides like bartering for stuff.
He's probably
with
not a fan of
knickknacks
Bitcoin.
that you've carved from wood at home, or berries or something.
I don't think he would like Bitcoin very much. He'd probably think it's a waste of energy.
I'm pretty sure he wouldn't like
I
Bitcoin.
don't think he'd like Bitcoin at all. That's a shame.
Yeah, and he also says all industrial manufacturing is going to be centralized and subject to licensing. So you're not going to manufacture anything unless there is a buyer in real need of its use and the people evaluating whether a buyer needs the use of some particular product are going to be within that central group, the small group
So it's going
of
to be
superior
Pentti.
people.
It's going to be Pentti. Just saying.
Yeah,
no,
it's just
you
going to be
don't need it.
And most businesses will come to an end. You'll only keep a handful of large corporations. For instance, those for producing equipment used for public transportation, bikes, or paper. Oh, and there'll be no construction of new buildings. And a lot of the buildings that were previously built will be demolished for wood because wood will be used for heating. And you want that wood, as much as possible, not to come from still living trees. His changes to the educational system are interesting. So there are not going to be any foreign languages during primary school, and you only teach these in specialist schools for training workers in foreign relations. You're going to have much less maths.
Yeah,
and he says
maths.
that you're going to have an all-round education instead, which is mostly natural sciences, history, Finnish, sport, art, and then what he calls civil skills. And I'll read a quote describing what he thinks civil skills are. He says, "Civil skills include responsibility towards one's neighbour, nature and mankind, social skills, behavioural education and practical abilities. Every citizen will learn how to mend, patch, handle the most common tools, build axe shafts, file saws, gut fish and skin animals. The handling of food will be painstakingly taught. Everyone will learn how to bone a fish in such a way that only the largest ribs are left, and to use their teeth in mincing food in such a way that the skin, innards, fat and bone marrow will not be wasted." He also says, right from the start, the school system will root out all competition from society. So he says we need to keep universities, and he says they'll be maintained whatever the cost. And they're an investment in spiritual capital, and they'll focus on the humanities, philosophy and natural sciences. And any sciences that can be commercialised will be stopped. I also liked that art and music will be widely practiced, but controlled by a central authority. I quote, "In the literary field, the Ministry of Education will grant permissions to print only fictional and non-fictional works of high quality. Trashy novels will vanish." Yeah,
No more
get
Mills
rid
and
of the
Boone.
stuff he doesn't like.
No more Mills and Boone.
Damn, that's a shame.
Probably no more F. Gardner. F. Gardner might
F.
not
Gardner will
make.
make. I'm sure the Call of Horror series
will be
on the Ministry of
whitelisted
Education's
by the
list of
global
approved
eco-fascist government. Will whitelist F. Gardner. Like Pentti, F. Gardner, Unabomber.
Oh, here's a good quote. I've got a quote here. "The people most responsible for the present economic growth and competition will be transferred to the mountains and highlands to be re-educated."
Very ominous. Re-educated.
Pentti Linkola's mountain eco-fascist re-education camps in
the
Finland.
Gulags in the Finnish mountains. Yeah.
He also says that sentences for crimes will become generally harsher. It's really fun reading environmentalism that's not from a left-wing perspective.
Yeah, so it's basically like I'm sure most people have had this conversation at some point, but the conversation of like, if I were in charge, like if I were the head of the government or a benevolent dictator, it's like, I would do X, Y, and Z. This final essay is basically Linkola just saying, yeah, here's all the things that I would fucking do if I were the emperor. And he's just like, I would basically just come down with a fucking iron fist and enforce my worldview on everybody.
Yeah, and this is in no way veiled. He's very open about the fact that he's authoritarian and that it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think where he sort of fell down in really like realizing his dreams of a global eco-fascist one world government, where he fucked up is like, you can't also, how do I put this? Just logistically, it's like, are you going to be a tree hugger and spend all your time in the fucking bush? Or are you going to go and create a one world government? Like, you got to pick one, mate. Like, if you're spending all the time like out on the lakes fishing, like, you're just not going to be an effective like fascist dictator.
Did he want a one world government?
No, that's me just being hyperbolic. He wanted a one Finnish government.
Oh,
But
you're going further. You're saying he's a whip.
Yeah, it's fucking pussy. Come on, mate. I want a one world government ruled by dolphins, telepathic dolphins.
Ilona Selke. I reckon Don Paris and Ilona would be part of this ruling elite.
Just complete mayhem that would ensue if the world were run by those two.
It'd be absolute chaos.
Just nothing would make any sense. None of the trains would run on time.
How about I close the section when he's talking about his ideal society with a a quote on why authoritarianism is necessary. He says, "Why then is a strict central government needed? I have already referred to the shameful history of mankind. If ordinary individuals, the people, masses, are given the chance to choose, like magpies, they will again and again go for the shiny things, leaping like butterflies into the flames. A government led by a few wise individuals is necessary to protect the people from itself." And like that's the end of the book.
What are your overall thoughts?
I enjoyed this much more than I thought I was going to.
Yeah, same. I was going
It's a fun book. I wouldn't recommend people read the whole thing unless they really want to read about Pentti Linkola counting birds with his wife, because that is a lot of this book that we just didn't talk about because it's pretty repetitive. But I think if people want to get a feel for eco-fascism or a feel for extreme environmentalism from a right-wing perspective or from a non-progressive perspective, then read the last essay in this book. And like it's pretty short, and I think that's a worthwhile use of your time.
Don't read any of that like pussy progressive environmental shit. Like, don't read none of this XR propaganda or any of that. Like, fucking get some Linkola in you. Like, I respect him for just being a fucking mad as a
get
cut
some
snake,
Linkola in you.
Not the like, fuck this like gluing your hand to a fucking.
I wonder what this
piece
guy
of
was
art
like.
Shit. Like, go out, hunt some birds or something, you know, send some mail bombs, you know, be like Uncle Ted and Uncle Pentti. Be really committed to your cause.
Uncle Ted, Uncle Pentti, yeah. Be like Osama. I find it so good that he gave a shout out to both Osama bin Laden and the Unabomber. That just made the book. Yeah.
Very
pleasantly surprised by this book.
I kind of recommend it from the point of view as it actually is an interesting book. You know, skip the parts that are boring.
Yeah, you don't have to read everything. Okay, so next episode, probably going to be me talking about the 120 Days of Sodom by the Marquis de Sade. Either with Ed, I'll just be telling him about the book because he doesn't want to read it, fair enough, or me talking to myself about it. Either way, that's likely to be the next episode. After that, we've got The Mother Plane by Elijah Muhammad. We're going to be getting into some black Israelite teachings. So see you next time. Thanks for listening. Levi's browser's fucking up. Levi says goodbye too. See you next time.